Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Spartan Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Spartan Deku had Mjolnir armor? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Spartan 715 rushes down the hall of the UNSC spaceship. While doing so he takes down several grunts, jackals, and a few elites with an alarm blaring in the background. Majority of the staff have been killed by the Covenant and currently the UNSC ship is set to self-destruct soon in order to take out the nearby Covenant spaceship alongside it. Spartan 715 rushes into the hangar bay to find the last remaining Pelican. He pulls out his assault rifle to give himself suppressing fire against the Covenant in the hangar bay. Once he's inside the Pelican he immediately closes the hatch. Alexander, start the ship now. Alexander, Spartan 715's AI replies, already on it. The AI starts the ship as Spartan 715 accesses the turrets, killing off as many of the Covenant as possible so that the Pelican can fly outside the hangar. Alexander flies the Pelican out of the hangar bay at top speed. Shortly after they exit, the UNSC self-destructs, destroying all nearby Covenant ships. Spartan 715 visibly relaxes as Alexander comments, looks like we managed to escape just in time. Spartan 715 asks, can we get into contact with the rest of the UNSC forces? Alexander searches for a moment before he answers, negative, it looks as though they're already gone. Spartan 715 asks, alright, there's no point in trying to track them down, take us to the nearest UNSC outpost. Alexander replies, roger that. Alexander does a search for the nearest UNSC outpost. It seems as though the nearest outpost is many light years away. There's no way we can get there with the Pelican's top speed. Spartan 715 suggests, what about the slip space drive? Alexander replies, that kind of technology is still relatively new, technically we could use it, but we still don't know what the aftermath would be. Spartan 715 states simply, if it'll get us to our destination then it doesn't really matter, we'll worry about the consequences later. Alexander replies as he gets ready to go into slipstream, roger that. The slip space drive allows the ship in question to travel faster than light, however the problem is that it's only a one-time use for Pelican aircrafts. While they're in slipstream, Spartan 715 goes to take inventory of the equipment currently on the Pelican by accessing the manifest. Spartan 715 checks the manifest through the terminal. The Pelican is carrying plenty of ammunition, grenades, and armor abilities. Spartan 715 then checks his assault rifle and magnum to see how many rounds he has left for each weapon. Alexander interrupts him, Wolf, we're coming up on our destination. Once they exit slipstream, Spartan 715 sees a green and blue planet. Where are we? Alexander checks the system before he replies, this can't be right. Spartan 715 says, Alexander, where exactly are we? Alexander answers, the coordinates that I put in was supposed to take us to the nearest outpost, but what I'm seeing here should be impossible. Spartan 715 repeats, where are we? Alexander answers, we're at Earth. Spartan 715 replies in disbelief, didn't the Covenant glass Earth in order to kill off the flood? Alexander answers, they did, but there's no doubt about it, this is Earth. Spartan 715 hums thoughtfully before he says, take us down, I want to see this for myself. Alexander replies, roger that. Alexander flies the Pelican down into Earth's atmosphere as they approach the planet. At the same time Alexander links himself to the satellite system. Alexander comments as they see buildings, cars, trains, and people staring up at them, this is strange. Spartan 715 asks, what is it? Alexander answers, I linked myself to Earth's satellite system to confirm that we are in fact on Earth. Spartan 715 replies, and? Alexander answers, we're on Earth, but it's completely different to the Earth that we knew. Spartan 715 asks curiously, what do you mean? Alexander answers, as you already know our Earth was glassed by the Covenant, but this Earth is clearly untouched by alien civilization. However, it seems that there is one other major difference between the two Earths. Spartan 715 asks, which is? Alexander answers, apparently a few hundred years ago the humans here began to evolve with special unique powers. Alexander explains, they apparently call these powers quirks. These powers can give the users essentially any kind of ability you can imagine. Spartan 715 comments, I don't recall that ever happening for humanity. Alexander replies, that's because it didn't, according to the records I've found this Earth doesn't have any form of intergalactic space travel. Spartan 715 asks, so what does that mean? Alexander answers, it means that this is a completely different Earth. Suddenly they both hear a voice say something coming from a helicopter behind them. Spartan 715 asks, what did they say? Alexander answers, they said, you are in a no-fly zone, please land your vehicle. Spartan 715 replies, tell them that we need a place to land safely without damaging the surrounding areas or their citizens. Alexander does as he is told in their native tongue. Once they reply back, the helicopter flies in front of them as Alexander follows behind them. They said follow us. Spartan 715 replies, I figured that. The helicopter leads them to a place with a chain link fence with enough space for them to land while the helicopter lands on a pad on top of the building. Alexander lands the Pelican as Spartan 715 makes his way to the hatch that opens as they descend. As they descend, Spartan 715 sees a man in a tan coat and another person with a cat head. Once the Pelican has landed, Spartan 715 walks out and looks between the two of them with most of his focus on the man with the cat head. The two men look to be somewhat intimidated by Spartan 715's armor and his size being at 7 feet 2 inches. Alexander acts as the translator between Spartan 715 and the natives. The man in the tan trench coat asks, who are you and what are you doing here? Spartan 715 answers, I am Spartan 715 of the UNSC, code name, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku sir. As for what I'm doing here, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. The man looks at Izuku with confusion before he says as he motions towards the nearby building, do you mind following us so that we can ask you a few questions? Izuku simply starts walking towards the building with both men guiding him. As he follows them, he takes in the surroundings. The man in the coat opens a door for Izuku to a room with a single table in the middle and 2 chairs each on opposite ends of the table. Izuku thinks to himself as he takes a seat opposite of the man in the trench coat with the Catman standing beside him. Interrogation room. The man in the coat asks, so Izuku, what is this UNSC that you mentioned earlier? Izuku answers, the UNSC is the United Nations Space Command. It's the military force for the protection of humanity. The man pulls out a notepad as he begins writing down the information that he's gotten so far. The man asks skeptically, so you're saying that you're from space? Izuku quips, do I look like I'm from here? The man with the cat head comments, he's got you there. The man with the coat shoots a glare at the man with the cat head before he asks, you said your name was Izuku, but what about your last name? Izuku answers, I don't have a last name, all those who were in the Spartan program were orphans. Both men looked at Izuku in surprise as he explains, since we were unwanted by society we were entered into the Spartan program to become soldiers. The man in the coat asks hesitantly, how old were you when you were taken into this Spartan program? Izuku answers as he thinks for a moment, I believe I was either 4 or 5 at the time, I'm not exactly sure. The man in the coat asks, so what did this Spartan program consist of exactly? Izuku answers, the Spartan program is a series of UNSC projects designed to create generations of physically, genetically, technologically, and mentally superior super soldiers as a special fighting force within the UNSC military. The man in the coat asks, do you mind telling us exactly what it is that you did in the Spartan program? Izuku answers, negative, that is sensitive information that I'm not at liberty to give out. The man then asks, what about your quirk? Izuku answers, I don't have a quirk. The man nods before he stands up and says, we'll be right back. The two men walk out. Sansa asks as they exit the room, do you really believe what that guy is telling us? Tsukachi answers, he seems to believe it, but his story is so crazy that it's kind of hard not to believe. Sansa asks as he looks at Tsukachi in disbelief, you serious? Tsukachi replies, we brought in a guy decked out in armor I don't think any military has ever seen flying in an aircraft I've never seen before. Sansa comments, okay, that's a fair point, but you can't honestly believe that he's from space. Tsukachi sighs as he massages his forehead. He believes that he's telling the truth and the way he speaks is as though he's from some sort of military force. Sansa suggests, maybe he's part of a secret program for the Japanese military. Tsukachi deadpans as he looks at Sansa, have you been reading conspiracy theories again? Sansa doesn't answer for a moment before he looks to his left without being prompted as Tsukachi comments, I thought so. Sansa then asks as he looks back at Tsukachi, but in all honesty, do you really believe him? Tsukachi answers, I don't really know what to believe yet, I'll still need some information before I can come to a conclusion. Sansa nods before he asks, what should I do with the information we just got? Tsukachi answers, for now don't tell anyone, just tell them that we currently have someone in the interrogation room who was flying an unauthorized aircraft. Sansa nods as Tsukachi enters the room and says, sorry about that, just needed to speak with my associate. Izuku asks, you mean the cat? Tsukachi replies as he sits across from Izuku, right, I forgot, my name's Detective Tsukachi Naomasa and my associate is Officer Sansa. Izuku asks, is that one of those quirks I've heard about? Tsukachi answers with a nod, yes, that's one variation of a quirk. Tsukachi then asks as he clasps his hands together on the table, tell me, what do you currently know about quirks? Izuku answers, Alexander informed me that humanity had begun to evolve a few hundred years ago and developed powers that you now call quirks, that's all that I'm aware of at the moment. Tsukachi asks curiously, who is Alexander? Izuku answers as he taps his helmet, Alexander is my AI unit, he's currently the one who is translating for us. Tsukachi asks, so without your helmet you wouldn't understand anything that I'm saying? Izuku answers with a nod, affirmative. Tsukachi hums for a moment before he asks, do you mind taking off your helmet so that I can see your face? Izuku reaches behind his head where he presses the button causing a hiss from his helmet before he takes it off revealing black curly hair, green eyes, and freckles. Tsukachi looks at Izuku in surprise before he asks, how old are you? Alexander answers in Izuku's place from inside the helmet, Wolf is currently 18 years old, he'll be turning 19 July 15th. Tsukachi sits back in his chair as he takes in the fact that an AI actually answered him, which practically proves that everything Izuku had told him was true. Tsukachi asks in disbelief, how did you get here? Alexander answers, in all honesty we're not sure of that ourselves, but my theory is that when we used the slipspace drive we accidentally traveled to another universe without meaning to. Tsukachi asks, is that even possible? Alexander answers, it's still relatively new technology and we don't know everything about it yet. Plus the slipspace drive only has enough power for one go. After a moment Tsukachi leans forward as he says, alright, this is way above my pay grade, I'm not exactly sure what to do with this kind of information. Izuku puts his helmet back on so that he can understand what Tsukachi is saying as he continues, however, I think I know just who to call about this. Tsukachi stands up as he gestures, follow me to my office. Izuku nods as he stands up and follows Tsukachi. As they walk past people stare at Izuku in awe at his armor and size. As they enter Tsukachi's office he says, close the door for me. Izuku closes the door behind him as he stands before Tsukachi's desk while he sits behind it and pulls out his cell phone. Tsukachi dials a number, after a few rings a small voice answers, hello detective. Tsukachi replies, hello Nedzu. Nedzu asks, to what do I owe the pleasure? Tsukachi answers, I've got a favor I need to ask you. Tsukachi explains who Izuku is, where he came from, as well as his current predicament. Nedzu comments, I see, that certainly is a difficult circumstance. Tsukachi replies, I can't exactly keep him here since he isn't even from our own planet. Nedzu then says, so you want Yui to take him in since he has nowhere else to go and likely wouldn't be able to function in normal society. Tsukachi leans back in his chair as he comments, that's the gist of it. Nedzu replies almost excitedly, I don't see why not, perhaps we could integrate him into our hero program since he's already a super soldier. Tsukachi then says, I'm not sure whether if that's a good idea or not, but that's not really my call. I'll bring him over now, we'll be arriving at City Beta. Nedzu replies before he hangs up, very well, I'll see you then. Tsukachi looks up to see Izuku towering over him, which he finds slightly intimidating, especially with the armor. I've contacted someone who may be able to help you with your situation. I'll have the pilot who brought you here lead you to Yui while I ride with you to make sure you know where it is. Izuku nods as he replies, roger that. Tsukachi walks out of his office with Izuku following after him as Tsukachi speaks into his radio informing them where to go while he and Izuku follow. Once they're outside the helicopter flies overhead while Izuku and Tsukachi make their way onto the Pelican. Izuku takes the driver's seat while Tsukachi stands behind him. Izuku starts the Pelican as he begins flying the Pelican upwards before following after the helicopter. Tsukachi seems surprised at how easily Izuku pilots the Pelican before he asks, they taught you flight training? Izuku answers, in the Spartan program we were taught hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, driving, and flying. There's basically nothing no Spartan can't do. Tsukachi nods before he goes back to watching the helicopter in front of them. Once they reach Yui, Tsukachi directs them where to land, which is in front of the gates of a walled-off city. Izuku opens the hatch revealing a giant mouse with a scar wearing a suit and a man with long greasy hair dressed in black wearing what seems to be a gray scarf. Tsukachi says as he and Izuku exit the Pelican, hello there Principal Nedzu. The mouse replies with a nod before he speaks, which surprises Izuku, to you as well detective. Nedzu looks at Izuku, I assume then that this is the one you spoke of. Tsukachi replies with a nod, that's right. Tsukachi then tears out a few pages from his notepad which he hands to Nedzu as he says, this is all the information I got from him. Nedzu looks through each page as he hums, I see. Nedzu looks back up at Tsukachi, we'll take it from here detective. Tsukachi nods before he makes his way to the helicopter that landed just before the Pelican. Nedzu then says as he looks at Izuku, please follow me. Izuku follows Nedzu while the black-haired man walks by his side. Nedzu says, "My name is Principal Nedzu and I know what you're thinking." Nedzu joyfully says, "Am I a mouse, a dog, a bear? Honestly, it doesn't really matter because I'm the principal." Izuku doesn't say anything, but is still perplexed that a giant mouse-looking thing is talking to him. Nedzu explains, "I run a university for people who are seeking a higher education, but my university specializes in producing the next generation of heroes." Izuku nods as he comments, "I see, I assume that these heroes are meant to fight off some sort of threat to Earth society." Nedzu replies, "That's right, although we call them villains, duh." Nedzu continues, "In any case, since you have nowhere to go, I've decided to take you in and possibly see about teaching you how to be a hero. However, before we can do that, we'll need to teach you about our history and society so that you can be a well-adjusted citizen." Izuku then says, "But I'm not even from your planet, how can I possibly be a citizen here if I'm not from here?" Nedzu answers as he looks back at Izuku, "I've got some friends in high places who can help with that little issue." Once they reach Nedzu's office, he says, "Now then, I want you to give me as much information as to who you are, where you came from, and exactly what it is that you're trained on." Izuku then says, "Alexander, please give them the information he requested." Alexander replies, "You got it, Wolf." After Alexander has filled in Nedzu and the man in black everything about Izuku, the man in black asks with a scowl, "So you were taken in by a program when you were still just a child to essentially become a soldier of war?" Alexander answers, "Essentially." Nedzu replies with a strange glint in his eyes, "Well, you won't have to worry about that here, we'll make sure that you are well taken care of." Izuku asks curiously, "You'd taken some random stranger you've just met a few hours ago who isn't even from your own planet just like that?" Nedzu answers with a nod, "That's right." Izuku replies, "You seem rather trusting." Nedzu comments, "From one person who has been experimented on to another, I know what it's like to grow up under those circumstances. Which is why I want to help you." Izuku hums in response before Nedzu says, "Now that I know what you currently know, I'm going to need to teach you everything you're going to need to know here in Yui. Since Alexander is already able to translate for us, I assume that he'd be able to assist in teaching you how to speak Japanese and English." Izuku answers, "I actually already know English, I just don't know Japanese." The man in black asks, "Is English just a universal language from where you're from?" Izuku answers as he looks at the man, "Not really, but that's the language the UNSC spoke most of the time, so that's the only one I learned." Nedzu replies, "Very well then, I'll have a school uniform tailored for you and then we'll need to take a picture for your student ID." Izuku nods before Nedzu looks at the man in black, "Aizawa, do you mind taking young Izuku here to the 1A dorms?" Aizawa replies as he stands up, "Sure." Izuku stands up as he nods to Nedzu, "Thank you for your hospitality." Nedzu replies as Aizawa and Izuku make their way to the door, "You're welcome." As they walk through the halls, Aizawa comments, "Currently there's no one else in the 1A dorms, so you'll have the entire place to yourself. However, that doesn't mean that you can just be lazy, myself. And other teachers will be checking in with you from time to make sure you're taking care of the place." Izuku replies, "Understood. We would have to clean the barracks at least once a week during training, I doubt this'll be too much different." Aizawa hums in response before he says, "I'm going to have to take your measurements so that we can start getting a uniform tailored for you. So I hope to God you at least have something underneath all that armor." Izuku asks as he looks at Aizawa, "Why wouldn't I?" Aizawa answers, "Just making sure." Suddenly they both hear an obnoxious voice say, "Show Yuta." Aizawa groans in displeasure as a man with yellow hair in a strange hairstyle walks up to him with a woman with long black hair. "What's up, who's the big guy?" Aizawa answers as he points at Izuku with his thumb, "His name's Izuku, he'll be staying in the 1A dorms from now on." The woman asks as she walks up to Izuku and begins examining him, "So what's with the armor?" Izuku answers, "This is Mark IV powered assault armor, it protects me while enhancing all of my physical abilities." The yellow-haired man asks, "Shouldn't he be in a uniform?" Aizawa answers, "That's why I'm taking him to the 1A dorms to get his measurements so that we can have a uniform tailored for him." The woman asks excitedly, can I do it?" Aizawa answers with a glare, "No." Midnight whines as she asks, "Why not?" Aizawa answers, "Because he just got here and the last thing he needs is you trying to hit on him." Izuku comments, "Even without my armor I can take a hit." All three of them look at Izuku in bewilderment before Izuku asks, looking between the three of them, "What, did I say something wrong?" Aizawa simply says, "We're done here, we need to go now." Aizawa pushes past the two of them with Izuku following behind him. "Was I not supposed to say that?" Aizawa asks, "Could you please stop talking?" Present Mike and Midnight continue staring at Izuku and Aizawa's retreating backs before Midnight asks, "Did he really just say what I think he said?" Present Mike nods as he answers, "I'm pretty sure he did." Midnight smiles sadistically as she comments, "I like him." Present Mike replies, "Could you please not right now?" Once they reach the 1A dorms, Aizawa comments, "This is where you'll be staying, just pick a room and take off your armor." Izuku nods as he makes his way up the stairs and into the first room on the right. The walls are completely white, there's a desk in one corner of the room with a bed on the opposite corner of the room, a drawer at the foot of the bed, and what looks like a closet in front of the bed. Izuku places his assault rifle, magnum, and energy sword on the bed before he starts taking off his armor. Izuku stands barefoot in black boxers and a gray tank top, standing at 6 feet 10 inches before he makes his way back downstairs to Aizawa. Once Aizawa sees Izuku, he says in English so Izuku can understand, "Alright, hold your arms out while I take your measurements." As Aizawa is measuring Izuku, he asks curiously, "Where is everybody else?" Aizawa answers, "There is nobody else, at least for this dorm." Izuku asks, "Any reason as to why?" Aizawa answers, "They didn't have enough potential to become heroes, so I expelled them." Izuku hums in response before he asks, "Is it possible for someone who's quirkless like me to become a hero?" Aizawa stops before he looks up at Izuku. "Kid, you're practically a foot taller than me and you have muscles like All Might. Yes, you can be a hero. Now shut up so that I can focus." After Aizawa finishes measuring Izuku, he says, "Alright, I'll send this over to Nedzu so that he can work on having your uniform tailored." Izuku asks curiously as Aizawa begins walking for the door, "What should I do in the meantime?" Aizawa answers as he looks at Izuku, "Have your AI teach you a bit of Japanese or something." Izuku makes his way to the same room he left his armor in. Izuku sets his helmet on the desk as he takes a seat in front of it. Izuku says, "Alright Alexander, how about we get started on Japanese?" Alexander replies, "Alright Wolf, let's start with," and for the rest of the day Izuku tried to learn everything he could about that Japanese language. Eventually Izuku hears a knock at his door. Izuku looks at his door as Aizawa opens it. "I've got food down in the kitchen if you're ready to eat." Izuku stands up as he makes his way downstairs following Aizawa. Once they reach the kitchen, Izuku sees 2 steaming cups on opposite ends of the table. Izuku asks as he and Aizawa sit down, "What's this?" Aizawa answers as he picks up his chopsticks, "It's called ramen." Izuku hums as he examines the placement of the chopsticks in Aizawa's hands before he tries to pick them up and hold them in the same manner. Izuku looks at the chopsticks in his hands as he tests them out by moving them before he tries to eat the ramen. Aizawa comments, "Probably should have just gotten you a fork." Izuku replies as he blows on the ramen in between the chopsticks, "It's fine, I'm a relatively fast learner." Aizawa hums as they both begin to eat in comfortable silence. After they're done eating, Aizawa takes the cups and chopsticks to throw them away. Izuku asks, "By the way, who were those 2 in the hall earlier?" Aizawa answers as he looks back at Izuku, "The blonde idiot is Yamada Hizashi and the perverted woman is Namiri Kayama, or Present Mike and Midnight respectively." Izuku asks as Aizawa goes back to his seat, "Are those their code names?" Aizawa answers, "Something like that, though in our society they're called our hero name since we're heroes." Izuku hums in response before he asks, "So what's your hero name?" Aizawa answers, "Eraserhead. Unfortunately I left my name in Hizashi's hands, which is why it sounds stupid, but I didn't really care at the time." Izuku asks, "Do you care now?" Aizawa quips, "Not really." Izuku then asks, "If you don't mind, what is your quirk exactly?" Aizawa answers, "My quirk is called Erasure. It allows me to erase other people's quirks." Izuku comments, "I would assume that it only works temporarily, otherwise if it were permanently you'd be in serious danger." Aizawa snorts before he comments, "Yeah, that would be overpowered. My quirk stays active until I blink, after that the person's quirk comes back." Izuku replies, "I see, still that's a useful ability all the same, you do very well in stealth ops." Aizawa replies, "That's essentially what I do." Izuku asks, "What about Present Mike and Midnight's quirks?" Aizawa answers in minor annoyance, "Hizashi's quirk is called Voice, it allows him to be as loud as he wants with assistance from the speaker around his neck. Namiri's quirk is called Somnambulist, it allows her to put whoever smells her to put people to sleep with her aroma. It apparently works better on men than it does on women." Izuku nods in response before he comments, "Sounds like Hizashi would do well in a firefight, and if Namiri were able to control where her aroma could go, she could use it as a smoke bomb or could use it in stealth ops as long as no one is aware of where she is or as long as they're men and don't have masks of any kind." Aizawa replies, "You sure know how to word vomit." Izuku replies, realizing what he was doing, "Apologies, I have a tendency to think out loud sometimes." Aizawa replies with a wave of his hand, it's alright, they say that talking to oneself is a sign of genius. Izuku nods before Aizawa finishes, or insanity. Izuku narrows his eyes at Aizawa as he smirks behind his scarf. Aizawa then says, anyways, once you're adjusted to our world you're going to be joining our next hero class. Izuku asks curiously, will there be some sort of test for me to do? Aizawa answers with a nod, yes, you'll be performing a written and physical test. Since your quirkless Nedzu will allow you to use your weapons and armor in the physical test, but it's the written test you should really be worried about. Izuku asks, when is the next test? Aizawa answers, the next entrance exam starts in 10 months, so I suggest you start learning. Aizawa then says as he leans down, speaking of which. Aizawa lifts up a seemingly heavy backpack as he places it on the table, I've got you some notebooks and writing utensils for you to use while you're studying. Aizawa pushes the backpack to Izuku who opens it and takes inventory as Aizawa adds, I also got you a laptop. Izuku looks at Aizawa and says with a grateful smile, thank you Aizawa. Aizawa realizes that this is the first time he saw Izuku smile before he replies, you're welcome kid. Izuku zips up the backpack before he places it on the floor beside him as Aizawa says, once your uniform is done we're going to go get you some new clothes. Izuku looks down at his current attire before he comments, yes, that would be useful. Aizawa then says as he stands up, anyways, you should go back to your room, we'll be leaving at 7 o'clock. Izuku nods as he and Aizawa part ways with him returning to his room where he continues to learn more Japanese. The following morning Alexander acts as an alarm at 6:30 causing Izuku to groggily wake up from his bed. Once Izuku is sitting up Alexander asks from Izuku's helmet, did you sleep well? Izuku answers as he stands up, not particularly, I think I've gotten too used to going into cryosleep. Alexander comments, it is much simpler than trying to fall to sleep naturally. Izuku notices beside his helmet lies what appears to be his uniform as well as some red shoes. Izuku begins putting on the uniform which fits him perfectly much to his surprise, however he has some trouble with the tie for a moment and ties it to the best of his ability. Once Izuku is fully dressed he walks outside his room and walks downstairs to see Aizawa waiting on the couch in the living room. Aizawa comments as he looks up at Izuku, good, you're awake. Aizawa walks up to Izuku before he notices his tie and asks, have you never tied a tie before? Izuku replies, never had to. Aizawa recalls Izuku's past before he says, alright then, I'll teach you how to tie a tie so watch carefully. Izuku actually has to sit down so Aizawa can reach around his neck and shows him how to properly tie his tie. After that Aizawa leads Izuku outside and to his car. Once they're both inside Izuku asks, why is the steering wheel on the opposite side? Aizawa looks at Izuku confused before he realizes, you must have driven American-style vehicles. Izuku replies as he looks at Aizawa, I don't even know what that means. Aizawa explains, on Earth America is the only country that has the steering wheel on the left side, while the rest of the world has the steering wheel on the right side. Izuku comments as he looks forward, that's weird. Aizawa starts the car as he replies, America is weird. Aizawa then drives Izuku out into the city as Izuku looks around at all the bright scenery and all the people walking around. Aizawa comments as he notices Izuku, I assume you've never actually been in a city before. Izuku replies as he looks at Aizawa realizing how he must have looked, no, it's just, Izuku looks down at his hands as a memory of his hands covered in blood flashes in his mind, I've never seen so many people alive before. Aizawa's eyes widen slightly before he looks back at the road thinking, no kid his age should have to deal with that kind of trauma. Eventually Aizawa parks his car as he says, alright, we're here. They both exit the vehicle as Izuku asks, where is here exactly? Aizawa answers as they walk towards a large building, this is a mall, it's a place where a lot of people go to shop for things they don't need with money they don't have. Izuku comments, that sounds irrational. Aizawa comments as he leads Izuku, tell me about it. As they walk in the mall Izuku can't help but notice a bunch of people staring at him, is there any reason why everyone is staring? Aizawa answers, UE is a very famous school as well as one of the most difficult schools to get into. So people are going to be curious seeing you in a UE uniform. Izuku nods with a hum of acknowledgement as he tries to ignore the stares. The first place they go to is a clothing store where Aizawa gestures to the clothes and says, pick whatever you want. Izuku simply picks 7 of the same gray shirts, 7 pairs of jeans, 6 gray tank tops, 6 black boxers, and a package of black socks. Aizawa asks as he quirks an eyebrow, is that seriously all you want? Izuku answers, it's all I'll need. Aizawa nods in understanding before they head to the cashier. The cashier asks with a bright smile, will this be all for you today? Aizawa nods as he answers, yeah, this is all. The cashier begins scanning the clothes before she comments, "You must be proud of your son." Aizawa replies in confusion, "I'm sorry." The cashier gestures to Izuku as she says, "Your son, I mean not everybody is able to get into UE after all." Aizawa replies with a strange feeling, "He's not my son, he's just," Aizawa thinks for a moment, "a relative." The cashier says, "Oh I see, helping out your family." Aizawa comments, "Something like that." As they leave the store, Aizawa asks, looking up at Izuku, "You hungry?" Izuku answers as he looks at Aizawa, "I could eat." Aizawa walks over to a restaurant and orders some food, then leads Izuku to a table for them to sit down. After a few moments the cashier calls out a number. Aizawa then goes up and brings back a tray with two things wrapped in thin paper. Aizawa picks up one, takes off the paper and begins to eat. Izuku looks down at the food before he picks it up and does the same. Once Izuku takes a bite, his eyes widen as flavors hits his tongue. Izuku then asks in amazement as he looks at the food, "What is this?" Aizawa answers with a smirk, "It's called a sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit." Izuku comments, "This is amazing." Aizawa chuckles before he replies, "I'll have to let you try some more food if this is how react to breakfast." Izuku savors each bite, happily chewing. Aizawa can't help but find Izuku's expression over something so simple very amusing. At that moment Aizawa recalls what the cashier had said earlier about Izuku being his son. Aizawa notices that Izuku's hair is black and curly. Aizawa thinks to himself, "He does kind of look like a son I would have." Aizawa shakes the thought from his head before he goes back to eating his biscuit with Izuku. Afterwards they go to buy a toothbrush, toothpaste, shampoo, body wash, a razor, and some shaving cream. Once Izuku and Aizawa arrive back on campus, Aizawa says, "Alright, first you should put your clothes in your closet and put all of your bathroom stuff in a box with a label with your name on it." Izuku asks, "Where would I find a box?" Aizawa answers, "I'll get one from the storage closet for you. After that we're going to need to move your spaceship to somewhere less visible." Izuku nods in understanding, "Yes, I did leave it out in the open, didn't I?" Aizawa hums in agreement before he and Izuku part ways, with him unpacking his clothes and putting them in his closet and drawer. Halfway through packing his clothes, Aizawa brings a plastic box. "Here's the box, you can put your toothbrush, toothpaste, and everything else in." Izuku replies as he looks over his shoulder at Aizawa, "Thank you, Aizawa." Aizawa puts the box on Izuku's bed before he leans against the wall. "Since you're going to be joining you, you're going to have to meet the same standard as everyone else." Izuku replies, "I understand." Aizawa then says, "So, other than Japanese, I'm going to test you on English, math, and science, since I doubt you can read Japanese yet." Izuku asks as he finishes hanging his shirts and jeans, "So you're going to try to see what I already know?" Aizawa answers with a nod, "That's right, once I figure out where you stand I'll be teaching you Earth's history, Japanese, and whatever other subjects you might be struggling in." Izuku nods as he replies, "I understand." Izuku then starts putting away his boxers and socks in his drawer as Aizawa says, "Something's been bothering me for a while." Izuku looks up at Aizawa curiously before Aizawa asks, "How come you always act as though I'm giving you an order?" Izuku looks at Aizawa confused for a moment before he looks down thoughtfully, "I assume that my form of speech is unusual." Aizawa comments, "Well yeah, there's that, but what I mean is you don't really seem at ease even though there's nothing to be prepared for." Izuku looks back up at Aizawa as he continues with a strange look in his eyes, "You seem like you're in a war zone." Izuku replies as he goes back to packing his clothes, "War is all I've been trained for, normal life isn't really an option for me." Aizawa hums before he pulls out his phone and sends out a text. After Izuku is finished packing his clothes, he begins putting away his bathroom items. Izuku picks up the box as he looks at Aizawa, "Do you know where the bathrooms are?" Aizawa replies with a nod, "Yeah, follow me." Izuku replies as he follows Aizawa, "Yes sir." As they reach the main floor they hear a familiar obnoxious voice call out, "Shoyuta." Aizawa and Izuku both look towards the door to see Present Mike and Midnight. As they walk over to them, Present Mike asks, "So what did you need?" Aizawa answers with a deadpan expression, "I need your help teaching this kid how to relax or have fun." Midnight looks at Izuku, who is still in his uniform. Midnight asks seductively, "Who's this fine young specimen?" Aizawa answers as Midnight walks up to Izuku, "That's the kid in armor from before." Midnight looks between Aizawa and Izuku before she asks, looking at Izuku, "How old are you?" Aizawa answers, "He's 18. Midnight asks with a predatory smile, "So you're legal?" Aizawa replies, "That's enough of that. I called you two here so that you could teach this kid how to be a kid, I guess." Present Mike asks confused, "What do you mean?" Aizawa replies with a quirked eyebrow, "Didn't you read Nedzu's memo?" Present Mike and Midnight look away guiltily before Aizawa huffs, annoyed, "Izuku is a child soldier. Both teachers look at Aizawa in shock as he continues. He was taken into a super soldier program when he was 4 years old since he was an orphan at the time. If you want to know more about him, go back and read the memo Nedzu sent out. By the way, he doesn't understand Japanese just yet. Present Mike asks, didn't he understand us earlier? Aizawa answers, he had a translator in his helmet. Midnight then asks looking at Aizawa, so what language does he understand? Aizawa answers as he looks at Midnight, English. Both teachers nod in understanding before Aizawa says, since both of you act more like children than adults I figured you could help him. Present Mike and Midnight reply with their arms crossed, that's rude. Aizawa retorts, but not inaccurate. Before either of them can argue, Aizawa points in the direction of the bathroom as he says to Izuku, the bathroom is over there, just put it wherever. Izuku nods as he replies, understood. Izuku walks over to the bathroom. Midnight comments as they watch Izuku walk off, he seems pretty stiff. Present Mike reprimands as he looks back at Midnight, Namiri. Midnight replies, I mean he seems uptight, geez I have some decency. Aizawa comments, not much though. Midnight pouts as she replies, I'm not that bad. Aizawa and Present Mike counter, you kind of are. Midnight says with a huff, you guys are mean. Present Mike then asks as he looks back at Aizawa, is there anything we should be aware of? Aizawa answers, based off what I saw when we were in public, I would avoid areas with a lot of people, since he isn't used to being in society. He also doesn't know what good food tastes like, and since he doesn't understand Japanese you'll have to translate for him. Present Mike hums thoughtfully before he says, snapping his fingers, movie night. Midnight adds with a smile, yeah, we can just have the settings set to English so that he can understand what they're saying. Present Mike replies, we can also have popcorn, soda, and candy. Izuku asks as he walks back into the main room, what happened? Present Mike answers with a smile in English, we're going to have a movie night. Izuku asks curiously, what's a movie night? Midnight answers, it's where we watch a movie at night. Izuku blinks before he asks, what's a movie? Present Mike asks, were you not allowed to watch TV or videos? Izuku answers, we watched training videos back when I was still a child. Midnight explains, well movies are like those videos except movies are supposed to entertain you and a lot longer. Izuku replies, I'm probably going to need to experience this in order to understand why you two are so excited. Aizawa comments, don't worry, they're always like this. Izuku replies as he looks at Aizawa, that sounds like an inefficient use of energy. Aizawa nods as he deadpans, agreed. Aizawa notices Izuku's attire before he says, go upstairs and change clothes. Izuku replies, yes sir. Izuku goes up to his room as Present Mike comments, he really doesn't do anything unless he's told to. Aizawa replies as he looks up the stairs, we're going to have to break that habit of his. Midnight comments, I like it. Aizawa counters, of course you would. Aizawa then says as he turns to Present Mike and Midnight, alright, so the plan is for you guys to go home and bring back whatever movies you think he'd be interested in. Present Mike replies with finger guns, you got it. As Present Mike and Midnight leave, Aizawa calls out, nothing rated R. Midnight groans in disappointment as the door closes behind them. Aizawa shakes his head at his friend's antics. As Izuku comes back downstairs wearing a t-shirt and jeans he asks, where did the other two go? Aizawa answers, I sent them out to get some movies for us to watch, in the meantime I'm going to test you on your knowledge of English, math, and science. Izuku replies, understood. After Izuku has moved his pelican somewhere less visible, Aizawa prints out some worksheets and hands them to Izuku in order to test him. In the next few hours Izuku finishes his tests in the kitchen. As Aizawa checks through Izuku's answer, Present Mike calls out as he enters, we're back. Izuku looks back at the door to see Present Mike and Midnight carrying several bags. Aizawa asks, what all did you bring? Present Mike answers, we brought movies of course, along with popcorn, some candy, some beef jerky, and soda. Midnight reaches into one of her bags and pulls out a pack of sour gummy worms, try these. Midnight hands the pack to Izuku with a mischievous smile on her face. Normally Aizawa would be against pranks, but he was honestly curious of Izuku's reaction. Izuku opens the pack before he reaches in and pulls out a gummy worm, what is this? Midnight answers, it's candy. Izuku shrugs before he puts it in his mouth to get hit by how sour it is, causing his face to scrunch up, which Midnight and Present Mike find funny. Once Izuku swallows it he shakes his head. Present Mike asks with a smile, how'd you like it? Izuku answers as he hands the pack back to Midnight, I believe these are an acquired taste. Present Mike and Midnight can't help but laugh much to Izuku's confusion before Aizawa comments, just ignore them, they're idiots. Present Mike pulls out a bottle of soda before he hands it to Izuku, try this, it's called soda. Izuku quirks an eyebrow in suspicion but complies anyway by unscrewing the top and taking a swig of the drink. Once the sweet carbonated drink hits his tongue, his eyes widen in surprise. Izuku looks at present Mike before he says, "I like this drink." Midnight places her hand on Izuku's shoulder as she smiles, "Come on, let's go watch some movies." Izuku looks at Aizawa as if asking for permission before Aizawa says with a wave of his hand, "You can go, have fun." Izuku stands up and is led to the living room by Midnight as present Mike comments, "You know, you two seem to have a father-son vibe going on." Aizawa replies without looking up from Izuku's papers, "So I've heard." Present Mike pats Aizawa's shoulder before he heads off into the living room with Izuku and Midnight. Most of the movies they had brought were hero movies, some of which were even based off of them to Izuku's surprise. Throughout the entire time present Mike and Midnight get Izuku to try the different foods and drinks they brought to see his reaction. In the meantime, while Aizawa is grading Izuku's papers, he can't help but notice that Izuku has gotten all of the answers right, even in science, much to his surprise. Aizawa then reminds himself, well, he is from an advanced civilization, so this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. After Aizawa has finished grading Izuku's worksheet, he goes into the living room to see Izuku watching the TV screen intently with present Mike and Midnight sitting on either side of him. Aizawa can't stop himself from smiling at the scene before he makes his way to the door, but he's stopped when he hears Izuku asks, "Where are you going?" Aizawa looks over his shoulder to see Izuku looking at him curiously, looking almost like a puppy. Aizawa answers as he lifts up his papers, "I'm taking your tests to Nedzu so that he can help with your future studies." Izuku asks, "Are you coming back?" Normally the question wouldn't have meant anything to Aizawa, but considering who Izuku is and where he came from, he can't help but feel a throbbing pain in his chest. Aizawa answers with a sympathetic look in his eyes, "Yeah, I'll be coming back." Izuku nods in understanding before he goes back to watching the movie as Aizawa leaves. Midnight asks curiously as she looks at Izuku, "So what do you think of Shoyuta?" Izuku answers as he looks at Midnight, "He's nice." Present Mike comments, "Yeah, he can be a bit of a grump sometimes, but he's a real softie once you get to know him." Izuku hums in response before they go back to watching the movie in front of them. Once Aizawa returns, he joins the three of them in watching whatever was playing on the TV and would eat his jelly packs. After a while Izuku falls asleep with his head falling over onto Midnight's shoulder. Midnight looks at Izuku's sleeping face and starts to blush. Aizawa asks with a smirk, "Something wrong, Namuri?" Midnight glares at Aizawa as she replies, "Shut up." Aizawa chuckles while present Mike simply says, "That can't be good for his neck." Midnight asks quietly as not to wake Izuku, "What should we do?" Present Mike answers with a grin, "I've got an idea." Present Mike whispers to Aizawa before he starts grinning as well, while Midnight simply looks between the two of them confused. Present Mike and Aizawa get up and gently move Izuku so that his head is resting on Midnight's lap, causing her to blush even more. Midnight glares at Aizawa and present Mike, who are simply grinning mischievously. Midnight comments quietly, "You guys are JRKS." Aizawa replies, "If you hate it so much you could just wake him." Midnight looks down at Izuku and simply can't find the nerve to wake him up, so she simply tries to relax to the best of her ability as present Mike and Aizawa sit next to each other still grinning. After a while all three of them fall asleep too. However, Midnight is woken up in the middle of the night to the feeling of Izuku twitching in her lap. Midnight looks down to see Izuku still asleep but looking distressed. Midnight tries to wake Izuku up by gently shaking his shoulder, "Hey Izuku, wake up." In Izuku's dream he's reliving one of his many battles with the Covenant, seeing his comrades and other UNSC soldiers die around him. He sees buildings exploding and rapid gunfire between the UNSC and the Covenant when he suddenly sits up with a gasp as he wakes. Izuku looks around to gather his surroundings, panting as he realizes where he is. Suddenly he hears Midnight ask worriedly, "Izuku, are you okay?" Izuku quickly turns around to see Midnight with a worried expression on her face before he catches his breath and answers, yeah, I'm fine." Midnight asks, "Were you having a nightmare?" Izuku answers as he gets into a more comfortable position sitting beside Midnight, more like a memory. It's only then that Midnight recalls that Aizawa had called Izuku a child soldier. Midnight asks as she gently places a hand on Izuku's shoulder, "Is there anything you need?" Izuku answers looking down at his now shaking leg with his hands clasped in front of him, "No, I'm fine." Midnight replies sympathetically, "Izuku." Izuku looks over at Midnight, "It's okay not to be okay." Izuku blinks in surprise before Midnight comments, "I know I'm probably not the most mature person to talk to, but even so, if you ever need to talk about something, anything, I'm here for you." Izuku opens his mouth but closes it before he figures out what he wants to say, "Thank you Namuri." Midnight blushes at how Izuku called her by her first name before she says with a genuine smile, "You're welcome Izuku." Izuku notices Aizawa and present Mike sleeping next to each other on the other couch before he realizes, I apologize for falling asleep on you. Midnight replies with a wave of her hand, it's alright, I didn't mind really. Izuku asks hesitantly, avoiding looking at Midnight, do you mind if I stay here with you? Midnight blinks in surprise before she answers with a smile, I don't mind at all. Midnight lies her head on Izuku's shoulder as Izuku lies his head on hers as they both go back to sleep. For the rest of the night Izuku doesn't have any more memories of his time in war. Once Aizawa and present Mike wake up they both see Izuku and Midnight still asleep next to each other. Present Mike begins shaking Aizawa's shoulder as he says quietly, look at them Shoyuta, they look so adorable. Aizawa replies, even though one of them is in skin-tight LTX? Present Mike stops shaking Aizawa before he comments, okay, that's fair, but still. After present Mike's comments Midnight begins to wake up as she says groggily, good morning. Once she sees present Mike smiling at her she seems confused before she looks to her right and sees Izuku still asleep next to her. Midnight's face turns bright red before she looks at present Mike whose smile only gets wider as she realizes how it looked. Midnight stands up as she says, it's not like that. Present Mike asks smugly, whatever do you mean? Midnight answers angrily, you know DMN well what I mean. Shortly after Izuku wakes up and begins looking around to see everyone else standing up in front of him, what happened? Midnight answers quickly, nothing happened. Izuku looks at Midnight confused before he says standing up, I'm going to go take a shower then go for a run. Aizawa replies as Izuku goes upstairs to grab himself a change of clothes, alright Izuku. Once Izuku is gone Midnight glares at present Mike and Aizawa, this never happened. Aizawa asks, what never happened? Midnight answers, exactly. Present Mike comments, we should probably leave our movies here in case Izuku wants to watch them sometime. Aizawa nods in agreement, yeah, he'll probably want to see more based on how he was watching last night's movies. Present Mike then says as he looks at Midnight, we should probably head home and get cleaned up too. Midnight replies still blushing and still slightly angry, yeah. Present Mike says as he and Midnight leave, tell Izuku we said, bye. Aizawa nods as Izuku comes backstairs and asks as the door closes, where are they going? Aizawa answers as he looks at Izuku, they're going to their own rooms on campus. Izuku nods in understanding before he heads for the showers with Aizawa showing him how to turn on the hot and cold water. Over the course of the following months Izuku spends most of his time learning Japanese as much as he can with present Mike's help while Aizawa and Midnight try to teach him about Earth's history. Fortunately due to the type of training Izuku was part of he learned at an incredibly fast pace compared to most people his age. Izuku also kept up with his training so he doesn't fall out of shape. It's on one of his days in the gym where he is bench pressing 350 kilograms. Suddenly he hears a feminine voice say, wow, you're really strong. Izuku looks to his right to see a blue-haired girl between a blonde boy and a boy with black hair. Izuku replies, thank you. Izuku puts the weight up before he sits up and asks, is there something you need? The blonde answers, no, we were just coming here to train when we saw you lifting all that weight. The blue-haired girl asks as she gets in Izuku's face, how much can you lift? How strong are you? What's your quirk? The boy with black hair comments, Hato, it's rude to just start asking people questions. The blonde says with a smile as the girl backs away, sorry about her, she tends to get excited easily. Izuku replies with a nod, it's fine, but to answer your question that was the max amount of weight I can lift without my armor. Among my comrades I placed 9th overall and I don't actually have a quirk. All three students look at Izuku in surprise as the boy with black hair asks, you're quirkless. Izuku nods before Hato comments, that's so cool. So are you trying to be the first quirkless hero or something? Izuku answers, I'm uncertain as of yet. The blonde asks with a confused expression, are you not in the hero course? Izuku answers as he shakes his head, not yet. The black-haired boy quietly comments, I don't remember seeing you in the sports festival. Izuku looks at the black-haired boy as he asks curiously, what's the sports festival? All three students look at Izuku in surprise before Hato asks, you don't know what the sports festival is? Are you a sheltered child? What was your childhood like? Did you never watch TV? The blonde pulls back on the back of Hato's uniform as he says, easy Hato, let him explain himself. Izuku answers, I'm actually new around here so I don't actually know a lot of things, I guess you could say I was sheltered from a certain perspective. I never really had a childhood since it was mostly just training and learning, I only just started watching TV a few months ago. The blonde extends a hand as he says, Mirio Togata, this here is Nijire Hato and Tamaki Amajiki. Izuku shakes Mirio's hand as he says, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Mirio asks as he tilts his head, what's your last name? Izuku answers, I don't have a last name, I'm an orphan. The fact that Izuku said it so matter-of-factly catches everyone off guard before Mirio apologizes, rubbing the back of his neck. Oh, sorry about that, that must have been a bit insensitive. Izuku replies with a shrug, not particularly, I've never really had a family before so I wouldn't know what it's like to live without one. Tamaki asks quietly, what's Spartan 715? Izuku answers as he looks at Tamaki, that's my number placement from when I was in the Spartan program. Hato asks much tamer, what's the Spartan program? Izuku answers, that's classified. Mirio asks, what do you mean it's classified? Izuku answers, I mean that's classified, none of you have authorization to that information. All three of them look at Izuku confused for a moment before Mirio comments with a smile, well if you don't want to tell us then that's none of our business. Mirio asks as he looks at his friends, are you guys ready to start training? Hato nods excitedly as she answers, yep. Tamaki simply replies, yeah. Mirio says with a nod to Izuku, it was nice meeting you Izuku. Izuku replies with a nod, likewise. Hato asks aloud as they walk away, I wonder what this Spartan program is, do you think it's some secret thing Yui is trying out? Tamaki answers, I doubt it, perhaps he was part of some sort of villain experiment and the heroes are keeping him here to help him integrate back into society or help him become a hero, it would explain why we wouldn't be allowed to know about it. Mirio hums before he comments, I don't think that's it either, but you sound like you're on the right track Tamaki. Meanwhile Izuku thinks to himself, they seem nice. The months leading up to the entrance exam is filled with Izuku learning more Japanese and Earth history while he trains in between sessions. Finally it's the day of the entrance exam. Aizawa stands at the entrance of the 1A dorm as Izuku stands beside him in his armor with all the weapons he thinks he'll need. Aizawa asks, do you have everything you need? Izuku answers without needing Alexander to translate for him, affirmative, I've got all the weapons I'll likely need along with ammunition. Aizawa asks, do you remember everything we taught you? Izuku nods as he replies, yes sir. Aizawa smirks before he pats Izuku on the shoulder, alright, show them what you've got. Izuku smiles inside his helmet as he replies with a nod, yes sir. Izuku walks towards the main building's entrance. As Izuku walks he notices a girl with brown hair tripping over her own feet. Izuku catches the girl by the arm as he asks, are you alright ma'am? The girl looks up at Izuku with her big brown eyes with wonder before she answers with a nod, why yeah, I'm fine, just a little nervous. Izuku helps the girl to her feet before he says, don't worry about what you can't do, just do what you can and if you have time you can figure out the rest. The girl stares at him surprised before she replies with a smile, thanks. The girl extends her hand with her pinky sticking outward, my name's Ochako Uraraka. Izuku shakes her hand as he replies, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Uraraka giggles before she comments, we should probably head inside. Izuku replies as he follows her lead, affirmative. The written portion of the exam is easy, but Izuku notices the stares he's getting. Izuku just assumes that they're staring because he's in his armor or because of his size or the fact he's carrying around weapons. After the written portion is over Izuku sits beside an ashy blonde boy who glares at him with red eyes, but Izuku pays him no mind as Present Mike comes on stage. Present Mike asks through his microphone, are you ready? Izuku answers like he used to during his time in training, yes sir. All the other examinees look at Izuku with confused looks before Present Mike says, thanks for the shout-out listener. Present Mike then begins to explain as the projector shows what the practical exam is going to be like. However he is interrupted when a boy with blue hair stands up and says, excuse me, but you only showed us 3 robots, but the pamphlet clearly shows 4. If this is a misprint then it is shameful especially for Yui's standards and you, the boy turns to look at Izuku, if you've come here to joke around then leave. Izuku replies as he stands up easily towering over everyone near him, Present Mike had asked a question when he first came on stage so I responded accordingly. Additionally, if you were taking this seriously then you'd wait until the end of Present Mike's explanation before asking questions. The blue-haired boy looks at Izuku in surprise before Present Mike says, alright everyone settle down, the 4th robot is worth 0 points which means there's no point in fighting it. Izuku sits down thinking, why would they put in a robot worth 0 points, unless, the boy with blue hair bows before he sits down as he says, thank you sir. Once they're all released they go to their own buses. Uraraka easily spots Izuku and sits beside him, hey there Izuku. Izuku replies as he looks at Uraraka, hello Uraraka. Uraraka comments as she starts rubbing her hands together nervously, so, how do you think you'll do in the practical? Izuku answers, I think I'll do well. Uraraka replies, yeah, I'm not so sure about myself. Izuku asks curiously as he looks at Uraraka, why is that? Uraraka answers, well, you see my quirk isn't exactly attack-based. Uraraka explains as she reveals the pads on her fingers, if I touch something with all 5 of my fingers then I can negate its gravity. Izuku replies, that sounds like a useful quirk, it'd certainly make things easier for clearing debris and getting people to safety. Uraraka looks at Izuku in surprise before she starts to think about what Izuku said. Once they arrive at City Beta all the examinees unload off the bus. Once everyone is off someone clears their throat behind Izuku and Uraraka causing them both to turn around. The boy with blue hair says, I wish to apologize for my rude behavior earlier, I hadn't taken into consideration that you were only doing what you thought was necessary. Izuku replies with a nod, it's no problem, but I would advise against questioning your superiors or interrupting them. The boy says, yes, that does seem rather rude in hindsight. Present Mike suddenly calls out, begin. All the examinees look up to see Present Mike standing on the wall, what are you waiting for, there's no countdowns in real life? The examinees look ahead to see Izuku already rushing into the city with his assault rifle drawn. Once Izuku sees the robots he starts to fire at them before taking cover behind a nearby wall. Izuku then peeks out around the corner before he goes back to firing at the robots again. It's only after they're all taken out that he realizes that they don't have any range-based weapons. Izuku hums before he puts his assault rifle on his back before he runs further into the city. Izuku says, Alexander ping the targets. Alexander replies, on it. On the heads-up display on the inside of Izuku's visor he sees red dots on his radar signifying the robots he's supposed to be taking down and yellow dots signifying other examinees. Izuku manages to take out a few robots by simply punching their heads off, after which he continues just using his fists. However, when Izuku sees a purple-haired boy getting surrounded, Izuku pulls out his magnum and shoots each robot in the head as he rushes over to the boy. Izuku asks, are you alright? The boy stares up at Izuku in shock as he nods. Izuku reaches down to his thigh and hands the boy his energy sword. Izuku explains as the boy holds the handle in his hand, press the button to turn it on, make sure your other hand is away from it when you turn it on. The boy turns on the energy sword causing him to look at it in awe before Izuku runs off without another word. Izuku goes back to punching the heads off of nearby robots as quickly as he can with ease. When the last remaining robots have been defeated he feels a rumble beneath his feet before he sees a giant looming robot. All the other examinees begin to run away from the robot, but Izuku simply stares it down ready to take it down. However, Izuku hears a familiar voice cry out, help. Izuku looks forward to see Uraraka with a slab of concrete across her legs as she reaches out calling for help. Izuku instinctively uses his armor speed ability allowing him to quickly rush towards Uraraka's position. Izuku says as he pulls out a plasma grenade, don't worry, everything will be fine. Izuku presses the button on the plasma grenade before he throws it as hard as he can at the zero-pointer's head, causing the grenade to stick before exploding, which causes the rest of the robot to explode. Uraraka simply looks up in awe before Izuku throws down a bubble shield causing the falling debris to bounce off the bubble. After the bubble disappears they all hear Present Mike call out, time's up. Izuku then turns around and lifts the concrete slab off of Uraraka before pushing it to fall opposite of her. Izuku says, Alexander, check her vitals. Alexander scans Uraraka much to her confusion before he answers, it seems as though she only has a few scrapes and bruises, but her ankle is sprained so I would advise against her walking. Izuku nods as he replies, understood. Uraraka asks confused, what are you talking about? Izuku then picks Uraraka up bridal style as he walks towards the exit without jostling Uraraka's ankle too much. At the same time Uraraka covers her face in embarrassment as her face turns completely red. Recovery Girl says as she makes her way between the examinees, alright everyone, move aside. Izuku walks up to Recovery Girl as he states, Uraraka has some scrapes, bruises, and a sprained ankle. Recovery Girl replies with a nod as she looks up at Izuku, thank you Izuku, just lie her down for me okay? Izuku replies, understood. Izuku carefully lies Uraraka down as Recovery Girl checks over her, but all the other examinees simply continue staring at Izuku curiously. However, the purple-haired boy from before walks up to Izuku as he says, rubbing the back of his neck, sorry, but I think I broke your weapon. The boy hands him the handle of the energy sword before Izuku replies, you didn't break. It just ran out of energy. I'll see if I can get it charged back up when I head back to my room. The boy replies with a nod before he walks away, thanks. Once Recovery Girl is finished healing Uraraka she turns around to the rest of the examinees and asks, is anyone else injured? Uraraka stands up as she looks at Izuku still somewhat embarrassed, thanks for saving me Izuku, I guess I kind of owe you one. Izuku replies simply, it's my job to protect citizens. Uraraka giggles before she sarcastically asks, are you a soldier or something? Izuku answers with a nod, affirmative. Uraraka blinks at Izuku in surprise before she bursts out laughing much to his confusion, you're too funny Izuku. Uraraka then says as she wipes away a tear, anyways, we should get back to the bus. Izuku replies with a nod as he follows behind her, right. Uraraka then asks as she looks back at Izuku, by the way, what was that thing you threw at the 0-pointer? Izuku answers, that was a plasma grenade, it sticks to whatever targets it comes into contact with before it explodes. Uraraka comments, that sounds really cool. As they're back on the bus, Uraraka comments, you know your costume looks like something an astronaut would wear. Izuku looks at Uraraka as he asks, what do you mean? Uraraka explains, well, I mean you look like someone who would go to space, you know. Izuku nods as he replies, yeah, I guess I do. After they exit the main building of UE, Uraraka says looking at Izuku with a slight blush, it was nice meeting you Izuku. Hopefully we end up in the same class together. Izuku nods as he replies, I'd like that. Uraraka's blush deepens before she waves and says, see you later Izuku. Izuku waves as he replies, see you later Uraraka. Alexander comments, looks like you made a friend. Izuku replies with a hum as he heads back to his dorm. As he enters he notices the lights are all off before he flips the light switch and hears, surprise. Party poppers go off as confetti rains down much to Izuku's confusion. Izuku looks around as he notices all the staff members of UE, what's going on here? Present Mike answers, we figured you'd pass so we decided to throw a party for you. Nedzu explains, I personally graded your written test and you passed with flying colors, you got perfect scores in English, math, and science. You also did very well in Japanese and history. Izuku takes off his helmet as he replies, thank you sir. Lunch Rush adds as he brings out a cake from the kitchen, I also baked you a cake while you were doing your tests. Izuku notices the cake is in the same shape and color as his helmet. Izuku blinks in surprise before he looks up to see all the staff members' smiling faces. Izuku begins to feel overwhelming gratitude as he smiles with tears in his eyes, thank you all, so much. Even though Izuku is a giant mass of muscle, the staff members can't help but find Izuku's genuine smile adorable. They all sit around the kitchen table and in the living room eating and talking, as Izuku is eating no longer in his armor. An emaciated blonde man who is 7 feet 2 inches walks up to him with a smile, hello there. Izuku replies as he swallows the food in his mouth, hello, I don't believe I've met you before. The man answers as he sticks out his hand, no, I'm a new staff member, my name's Toshinori Yagi. Izuku shakes his hand before Toshinori takes a seat beside Izuku as he comments, I noticed how well you had done in the entrance exam. Izuku asks curiously, you did? Toshinori nods as he replies, Nedzu had informed me about your situation, but I had no idea how well you were trained. Izuku nods with gratitude, thank you sir. Toshinori comments, from what I've heard you've managed to make quite the impact on the rest of the staff members here. Izuku hums in response before Toshinori says, I know you'll make a great hero someday young Izuku. Izuku repeats with gratitude, thank you sir. On the first day of school Izuku sits in class 1A in his school uniform as he waits for the rest of the students to arrive. The first to arrive is a girl with long black hair tied back in a ponytail. The girl walks up to Izuku with a satchel on her side, hello there, looks like we're going to be classmates from now on. Izuku replies with a nod, it would seem so. The girl introduces herself, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu. Izuku says, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Yaoyorozu tilts her head to the side confused as she asks, what about your last name? Izuku answers, I don't have a last name. Yaoyorozu replies as she realizes the implications, oh, I'm sorry I didn't know. Izuku waves a hand as he replies, it's fine, I understand. Yaoyorozu nods before she makes her way to her seat. The next student to walk in is the blue-haired boy from the entrance exam. The boy walks over to Izuku's desk as he says with chopping motions, hello there, congratulations in passing the entrance exam. Izuku replies with a nod, likewise. The boy sticks out his hand as he introduces himself, my name is Tenya Ida, it is a pleasure to meet you. Izuku shakes Ida's hand, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Ida replies, I look forward to working with you. Shortly after, more students begin arriving with Ida introducing himself to each one before the spiky blonde from the entrance exam walks in and they begin arguing. Izuku then sees the purple-haired boy from the entrance exam walk in and begin walking towards him. Izuku says, good morning. The purple-haired boy looks at Izuku in confusion before he says, the energy sword is working fine. The boy realizes who Izuku is before he comments, so that's what you look like under all that armor. Izuku nods before the boy introduces himself, Hitoshi Shinso. Izuku replies, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Shinso asks with a quirked eyebrow, is Forest Wolf going to be your hero name or something? Izuku answers, something like that. Shinso hums in response before he makes his way to the desk behind Izuku. Izuku then sees Uraraka walk in looking around the classroom. Izuku waves at Uraraka, causing her to walk over to his desk. Hello Uraraka, I see you passed. Uraraka asks in slight surprise, Izuku? Izuku nods before Uraraka comments, wow, so this is what you look like. Izuku nods as he answers, yes ma'am. Uraraka nervously rubs her hands together with a blush, well, it's nice to actually meet you face to face. Aizawa then says as he enters the room, if you've come here to make friends then you can go ahead and leave. Everyone looks at Aizawa as they go to take their seats. Aizawa comments, it took you all 8 seconds to get in your seats. You're all too irrational, I expect you all to be faster by the end of the semester. Aizawa pulls out a cardboard box from under his desk as he says, put these on and meet me outside. Everyone goes up to the box and gets out a gym uniform for their size. In the changing room when Izuku takes off his shirt he hears someone whistle and comment, DMN bro, you are jacked. Izuku looks behind him to see a boy with spiky red hair, oh, sorry, my name's Ijiru Kirishima, nice to meet you. Izuku turns to him as he introduces himself, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Kirishima looks up at Izuku with stars in his eyes, bro, that's such a manly way to introduce yourself. Izuku looks at Kirishima confused as he replies, thank you. Ida comments, let's hurry up. Kirishima replies, oh right. Izuku replies, yes sir. Once everyone is in their uniforms they all stand outside with Aizawa standing before them. Aizawa explains, alright, today you'll all be performing a quirk assessment test. Uraraka asks as she raises her hand, sir, what about orientation? Aizawa answers, if you want to get ahead of the game then you're going to have to start as early as possible. Waiting on ceremonies is pointless and irrational. Aizawa then says as he tosses a soft-balled Bakugu, the spiky blonde catches the ball, you got the second most points. I want you to throw the ball as far as you can while using your quirk. Bakugu lets out a growl as he walks to the center of the circle before he throws the ball using his explosion quirk yelling, die. Izuku thinks to himself slightly confused, why did he yell die? Aizawa reveals that Bakugu managed to throw the ball 705.3 meters, this is the kind of thing you can expect from Yui. Several other students begin talking about how excited they are and how fun the assessment seems. Aizawa replies slightly annoyed, sounds like fun huh, fine then the person who comes in last place will be expelled. Everyone except Izuku and a few students cry out, that's not fair. Aizawa asks, so what, you think earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, landslides, and other natural disasters are fair? Aizawa then says, there are plenty of things in life that aren't fair, some people grow up as orphans, some people are treated like soldiers from the day they are born, and some people have watched their friends and comrades die right in front of them. Aizawa finishes by saying, there are plenty of things in life that aren't fair, that's why it's a hero's job to combat against that unfairness. None of the students argue with Aizawa and simply nod in understanding before the quirk assessment starts. During the 50-meter dash Izuku is paired up with Bakugu. Bakugu sizes up Izuku as they both get ready. Once the starting gun is fired Bakugu uses his quirk to propel himself forward, but Izuku quickly passes him causing Bakugu to growl angrily. In the grip strength test Izuku ties with Shuji, in the sidesteps test Izuku places first, and continues to do well in every test following. By the end Izuku places first, while the person in last place is a tie between Hagakure and Shinso. Izuku assumes that Hagakure is crying based on the trembling of her shoulders while Shinso looks down in shame before Aizawa comments, by the way I lied about the expulsion. Everyone looks at Aizawa in surprise except for Izuku and a few others as he says with a creepy smile, it was all to get you to do your best. Aizawa then says as he leaves, your syllabi will be waiting on my desk, make sure you take your stuff to 1A dorms. Uraraka asks, where's the 1A dorms? Izuku answers, I know where the dorms are. The whole class looks at Izuku in surprise before he asks, what? Kaminari asks, how do you know where the dorms are? Izuku answers, that's classified. Uraraka sputters into laughter while everyone else looks at Izuku in confusion. As they all head back to their homeroom Kirishima asks, so bro, what kind of training regimen do you go through to get so buff? Izuku answers as he walks with Uraraka, Ida, and Shinso, it's called the Spartan program. Kirishima asks enthusiastically, can you train me? Izuku answers bluntly, no. Kirishima asks with a whine, why not? Izuku answers, the Spartan program requires you to start out at age 5 or younger. Shinso asks in disbelief, you started training when you were 5? Izuku answers, 4. Everyone blinks at Izuku in shock before he says, however, I can help train you to become faster, stronger, and enhance your reaction time. Kirishima asks excitedly, really? Izuku nods before he adds, if you really want to go through with this then I suggest you prepare yourself for the worst kind of hell you can imagine. Kirishima replies as he pumps his fists with a grin, that's so manly. Once they've got their syllabi, Izuku leads the class to the 1A dorm where all their luggage is waiting for them. Izuku directs them once they enter the building, the kitchen is over there, that's the living room, over there are the bathrooms, and up the stairs is where you'll all find your rooms. Don't bother with the room on the second floor immediately on the right, that one is mine. Kaminari asks, why, did you call dibs? Izuku answers as he looks at Kaminari, I don't know what that means, but my clothes and armor are already in there. Tsuyu asks as she places a finger on her chin, armor? Uraraka answers animatedly, yeah, Izuku's got this cool green armor that he wore during the entrance exam. He was taking out robots left and right just by punching their heads off. He even took out the zero-pointer with a grenade. Ashido asks incredulously, they let you bring in a grenade? Izuku blinks as he asks, was I not supposed to? Shinso adds, he also brought some guns and a laser sword. Ashido asks as she rushes up to Izuku, you brought a lightsaber? Izuku backs away in surprise before he replies, I'm not sure what that is. Shinso answers, it's not a lightsaber, he called it an energy sword. Ashido asks as she looks at Shinso, what did it look like? Shinso answers dryly, not like a lightsaber. Jairu comments sarcastically, very descriptive. After that everyone makes their way upstairs and begin putting their stuff in their rooms. Izuku sits on the couch in the living room while everyone else starts putting their stuff in their rooms. Shuji walks down shortly after and asks as he approaches Izuku, so Izuku, what school did you go to? Izuku answers, that's classified. Shuji asks as he sits on a nearby couch, you're not very open, are you? Izuku answers, I'm open as long as the information isn't restricted. Shuji asks as other students begin coming down, so what kind of information isn't restricted? Izuku answers, I was in the Spartan program, I'm not from around here, I'm trained in hand-to-hand combat, ranged, and close-range combat. I'm trained to use any kind of weapon at my disposal, I have an AI named Alexander, and I'm quirkless. The students who are now downstairs stare at Izuku in shock before he looks around and asks what? Ojiro asks, you're quirkless? Izuku answers, yes. Bakugu yells, bullshit, there's no way a quirkless loser can become a hero much less beat me. Izuku replies calmly, well I did. Bakugu yells, are you trying to pick a fight with me? Izuku answers, no, I was simply stating a fact. Bakugu lunges at Izuku with his right hook at the ready, but before he can hit Izuku, Izuku grabs Bakugu's right wrist and twists it while he picks him up by the throat with killing intent. Bakugu kicks uselessly as Izuku stares Bakugu in the eyes before Kirishima runs up and say, whoa, guys settle down. Izuku realizes what he's doing and gently lowers Bakugu to the floor as he says apologetically, my apologies, my instincts kicked in. Izuku looks at the rest of the students who stare at him fearfully before Kaminari comments, dude, what the hell? Izuku doesn't say anything and simply heads for the stairs, but Uraraka catches Izuku's wrist as she says sympathetically, Izuku. Izuku doesn't say anything as Uraraka hesitantly lets go of his wrist before he continues upstairs and goes into his room. Shortly after Izuku's door closes, the front door opens as Aizawa walks in. The students all look at Aizawa as he notices the tension in the air. What happened? Yaoyorozu answers, Bakugu had gone to attack Izuku unprovoked, so Izuku was forced to defend himself, but, Aizawa asks with barely contained anger in his voice, but? Yaoyorozu answers hesitantly, but Izuku started strangling Bakugu, I don't even think he knew what he was doing until Kirishima snapped him out of it. Aizawa glares over at Bakugu who is massaging his throat, Bakugu, if you attack another student again outside of a training session or unprovoked I will expel you, understand? Bakugu counters, he tried to kill me. Aizawa repeats menacingly, understand? Bakugu hesitates before he replies begrudgingly, yes sir. Aizawa sighs before he explains, Izuku has been through a lot, more than most if not all adults should in their entire life. Izuku was part of a secret program called the Spartan program. They would take orphan children that nobody wanted and make them into super soldiers by altering their genetic makeup and performing surgery on them to enhance their bodies. From what I'm aware of, Izuku has fought on the front lines for a total of 3 years before he came here. Izuku has seen things not even your worst nightmares can imagine, so if you attack him without provocation don't expect him to hold back. Aizawa asks as he looks over his students, do I make myself clear? The students reply hesitantly, yes sir. Aizawa says, I can't hear you. The students reply louder, yes sir. Aizawa comments, good, now I expect you all to apologize to Izuku when you see him. All the students nod in understanding before Aizawa makes his way upstairs. Aizawa knocks on Izuku's door, but receives no answer. Aizawa gently opens the door. Izuku. Aizawa sees Izuku sitting on his bed with Alexander walking him through breathing exercises as he shakes his leg nervously with his hands clasped in front of him with white knuckles as he stares down at them. Aizawa asks as he walks into the room, Izuku, are you alright? Izuku answers after he has calmed down a bit, I almost killed that kid. Aizawa replies as he kneels in front of Izuku, no Izuku, what happened wasn't your fault, your first instinct was to protect yourself and considering the kind of thing you went through I know that you were holding back. Aizawa explains, I've seen you fight, if you really wanted to kill Bakugo then you would have done it, but you didn't. Izuku replies, but I almost did. Aizawa repeats before Izuku can finish with both hands on Izuku's shoulders, but you didn't. Izuku looks up at Aizawa with tears in his eyes as Aizawa explains, you did what you had to in order to protect yourself, there is nothing wrong with that. Do you understand? Izuku takes a breath before he answers with a nod, yes sir. Aizawa replies with a light smile, good, do you feel ready to come downstairs? Izuku thinks for a moment before he answers quietly, I don't know. Aizawa says as he pats Izuku's shoulder, that's alright, I'll go get you something to eat for lunch, okay? Izuku nods as he replies, okay. When Aizawa leaves Izuku's room he's greeted by Uraraka, Ida, Shinso, and Yaoyorozu. Uraraka asks worriedly, is Izuku going to be okay? Aizawa answers with a nod, he'll be fine, but I don't think he's ready to face everyone after what happened, so just give him some space for the time being. Uraraka nods in understanding with a dejected expression, okay. Aizawa then says, if you really want to help Izuku, just be there for him, make him feel welcome. Ida replies energetically, yes sir. Once Izuku has completely calmed down he goes over to his desk to study more on Japanese and history to pass the time and take his mind off everything. After a while he hears a knock at his door, as he turns to see who it is. Aizawa opens the door with a tray with a bowl of katsudon. Aizawa comments as he places the tray in front of Izuku, I wasn't sure what you wanted, so I just got you your favorite. Izuku nods as he smiles lightly, thank you Aizawa. Aizawa ruffles Izuku's hair as he replies, you're welcome kid. As Aizawa leaves Izuku feels the top of his head. Where Aizawa had just ruffled his hair, Izuku thinks to himself as he feels something warm in his chest, what was that? Izuku shakes his head to clear his mind before he starts eating his lunch. Once he's finished he takes the tray back downstairs to the kitchen where he sees some of his classmates still eating lunch. Uraraka looks up and says with a bright smile, Izuku. Izuku blinks in surprise as the rest of his classmates look at him, but they're no longer looking at him in fear. Uraraka rushes up to Izuku as she asks carefully, are you okay? Izuku replies with uncertainty, yes, I'm fine. Uraraka asks, are you sure? Izuku nods, yes. Uraraka smiles before she decides to hug him much to his surprise since he's not sure what she's doing. The rest of the class look at Izuku apologetically as Ojiro says, we're sorry about what happened earlier. We shouldn't have assumed that you had a life like ours. Izuku looks around in confusion before he asks, what do you mean? Shinso answers, Aizawa told us what happened to you, about how your childhood was like and how we're a soldier before coming to Yui. Izuku blinks in surprise, not really sure what he's supposed to say or do before he asks, so what now? Uraraka answers as she looks up at Izuku with a smile, now, we do everything we can to make you feel welcome. Izuku looks down at Uraraka before he looks at the rest of his classmates who simply nod in agreement. Izuku smiles before he says gratefully, thank you. Uraraka beams at him before she replies, you're welcome. Uraraka then leads Izuku to the kitchen table as she says, come on, we'll introduce you to everyone since we didn't really get to do it earlier. Everyone at the table introduce themselves to Izuku, the only ones missing are Bakugo and Todoroki. After lunch is over and everyone has introduced themselves to Izuku, Aizawa walks into the kitchen and notices Izuku, hey Izuku, if you can could you move your armor and weapons to the support course? Izuku answers as he looks at Aizawa, yes sir. Aizawa leaves as Izuku stands up. Uraraka asks, do you mind if we help you Izuku? Izuku answers as he looks at his friends who seem eager to help, of course, but most of you can only carry one piece at a time since the armor weighs a total of 454 kilograms. Izuku's classmates ask in disbelief, how can you even wear that thing? Izuku answers without missing a beat, I'm trained to wear it. All his classmates stare at Izuku before he asks for confirmation, do you still want to help? Most of them nod before they follow Izuku to his room where his armor is currently on a mannequin and his guns are sitting on the rack beside it. Izuku carefully takes off each piece and hands it to one of his classmates. Izuku asks as Kaminari seems to struggle holding the arm piece, "Do you got it?" Kaminari answers as he struggles, "Why yeah, I got it." Zero comes to his side as he helps him carry it, "Let me help you out." Most of his classmates help each other carry the pieces except for Uraraka, who simply negates the gravity of her piece. Once everyone has a piece of Izuku's armor and one of his weapons, he tucks the chest piece under his arm as he says, "All right, follow me." Izuku then leads his classmates to the development studio. Once they arrive, Izuku knocks on the door as he hears some work going on inside. Izuku knocks on the door harder before Power Loader opens the door. "Ah, Izuku, it's good to see you. What are you doing here?" Izuku answers as he shows his chest piece. "Aizawa informed me to take my armor to the support course for some reason." Power Loader nods in understanding. "Ah right, bring it in." Uraraka asks as everyone starts filing in, "What is this place?" Power Loader answers while Izuku starts putting the pieces of his armor back together on a nearby mannequin. "This is the development studio where we make costumes and gadgets." One of the freshmen wanted to check the place out and make a few gadgets, but she seems to have gotten carried away. Everyone notices a girl with pink hair with a welder working on a piece of machinery on a workbench. Once Izuku has put all the pieces of his armor back together on the mannequin, he asks as he turns to Power Loader, "Do you know why Aizawa asked me to bring my armor and weapons here?" Power Loader answers, "Your real classes start tomorrow, so you're going to need your armor for foundational heroics." Tsuyu asks curiously, "Do you know who teaches that class?" Power Loader answers with a grin, "Now that would be telling." Izuku asks curiously, "Will I need to come by here to pick up my armor before class?" Power Loader answers, "No, we'll have it sent over to the changing room you'll be using tomorrow." Izuku nods in understanding as he replies, "I understand." Power Loader then says as he looks over the rest of the students, "Well, you all should head on out, you've all got a big day tomorrow and you're going to need your rest." Everyone replies with a nod, "Yes sir." Zero asks as they all leave the studio, "So what do you guys want to do for the rest of the day?" Ashido raises her hand as she answers, "Oh, let's watch a bunch of old movies." Since Izuku has never seen any of the older movies before, we can show them to him and see what he thinks. Uraraka adds happily, "That's a great idea." Shinso asks, "What movie would we start with?" Ashido answers excitedly, "Star Wars Episode 4. Everyone nods in agreement before Izuku asks, "Why would we start with Episode 4? Shinso explains, "Even though it's the 4th episode, it was actually the first one to come out." Izuku asks confused, "When did Episode 1 come out?" Shinso answers, "It was the 4th one to come out." Izuku comments, still confused, "That's strange." Kaminari asks, "Should we show him the sequel trilogy?" Ashido hushes Kaminari before she answers, "We don't talk about the dark times." Kirishima asks, "What about Rogue One?" Ashido thinks for a moment before she says, "Okay, change of plans, we watch Rogue One then Episode 4. Everyone except Izuku nod in agreement while Izuku is still as confused as ever. For the rest of the day they all watch Rogue One and the original Star Wars trilogy. Izuku finds the series to be strange yet fascinating at the same time. Izuku's reaction to Darth Vader's first appearance is a mixture of fear and awe, seeing someone so dangerous, yet his classmates seem excited to see him on screen. Overall, Izuku actually likes the Star Wars movies, but when Episode 6 finally ends, Aizawa says as he walks into the living room, "All right everyone, lights out." Everyone lets out whines of disappointment except Izuku as Aizawa says, "Don't give me that, you've all got classes tomorrow." Everyone except Izuku reluctantly go to their rooms. Uraraka taps Izuku on the arm as she passes by, catching his attention. Uraraka waves with a smile, "Good night Izuku." Izuku replies with a nod before he goes into his room, "Good night Uraraka." As Izuku closes the door behind him, Alexander asks from Izuku's laptop, "Did you have a good day, Wolf?" Izuku answers with a nod, "I believe I had a good day." Alexander adds, "Not counting what that Bakugu prick did, of course." Izuku simply hums in response as he begins taking off his clothes so that he can sleep in his boxers and tank top. The following day Izuku gets dressed for school before he heads down to the living room. Izuku notices Ida and Yaoyorozu in the kitchen, who say, "Good morning Izuku." Izuku nods as he replies, "Good morning, what are you two doing?" Ida answers, "Making coffee." Izuku asks as he walks into the kitchen, "May I have some?" Ida answers, "Of course, how do you like your coffee?" Izuku replies, "Black." Yaoyorozu comments with a smile, "I never took you for a coffee person Izuku." Izuku replies as he looks at Yaoyorozu, "Aizawa introduced me to it, I like it." Once Ida hands Izuku a cup of coffee, their classmates begin making their way downstairs, groggily making their way to the kitchen. Ashido asks, rubbing her eyes, "How can you guys get up so early?" Izuku answers, "My AI, Alexander, wakes me up." Kaminari comments, "So your AI is basically your alarm clock." Izuku replies, "Essentially." After everyone has woken up and had their breakfast, they all head for their homeroom to begin their second day of school. Once Izuku sits down at his desk, Bakugo stomps over, catching everyone's attention. Bakugo says as Izuku looks up at him, "Don't think that what happened yesterday makes you better than me, got it? I'm going to prove to everyone here that I'm the best around here." Izuku blinks in confusion before he replies uncertainly, "Okay." Bakugo then takes his seat in front of Izuku as Shinso comments, "I think that's the Pomeranian's way of saying he forgives you for yesterday." Izuku nods in understanding as Bakugo yells at Shinso, "Shut up, Einstein." Shinso retorts, "Whatever you say, Dandelion." Bakugo growls as Aizawa starts class. The day proceeds as any normal school day, which is still new to Izuku since he's only had to learn by himself since he arrived on Earth. Finally, it's the last day of class, Foundational Heroics. They all hear a booming voice from the hall say, "I am here." All Might opens the door as he says, coming through the door like a normal person. All Might walks in as the classroom buzzes with excitement before Izuku interrupts with confusion, "I'm pretty sure that's not how a normal person walks into a room." Shinso comments as everyone looks at Izuku, "It was meant to be a joke." Izuku replies in realization, "Oh, okay." All Might clears his throat before he says, "Now then, today we'll be doing." All Might shows a blue flash card with white letters, "Battle Training." Izuku's classmates start vibrating with excitement before All Might presses a button on a remote as he says, "However, first you'll need your hero costumes." All Might looks back at the class, "Now then, once you're all changed, we'll be head for City Beta." Everyone except Izuku grabs their respective suitcases based off their student number before they head down to the changing room where Izuku's armor and weapons are already waiting for him. Izuku takes off his school uniform before he begins putting on his armor, while all the guys can't help but wonder how exactly Izuku can wear all of it without getting crushed. Once they're all in their costumes, they begin loading on the bus where All Might is waiting for them. Uraraka comments when she sees Izuku, "You know, Izuku, your armor looks really cool." Izuku replies with a nod as he notices Uraraka's costume, "Thank you, you also look good." Uraraka replies with a slight blush, "You think so? I feel like I should have been more descriptive with what I wanted." Izuku hums as he analyzes Uraraka's costume, "Do you have a communicator or a heads-up display for your helmet?" Uraraka answers in confusion, "No." Izuku then asks, "What about your shoes? Do they have some sort of shock absorption at the bottom of them to reduce sound?" Uraraka answers again slightly embarrassed, "No." Izuku hums again before he comments, "We can see if the support course can upgrade your costume so that it can better suit your needs." Uraraka looks at Izuku surprised as she asks, "They can do that?" Izuku answers with a nod, affirmative. Uraraka comments as she and Izuku load onto the bus, "I should write that down so that I can remember it." Izuku replies, "You can write it down when we get back to the dorms, then bring it to the studio tomorrow to have it upgraded." Uraraka asks, "Do you know how long that might take?" Izuku shakes his head as he answers, "I don't have that information. I would assume it would take a few days to fix." Uraraka comments, "Well, it's better to fix that now than later." Izuku nods as he replies, "Agreed." Kaminari asks excitedly as he looks at Izuku, "Hey, do you think you could help me upgrade my costume?" Izuku answers with a nod, "I don't see why not." Kirishima asks, "What about me?" Shinso comments, "I could probably use some help with my costume." Tsuyu adds with a croak, "I think just about everyone could use some advice from you, Izuku." Yaoyorozu says, "Perhaps we can discuss this when we get back to the dorms so that we'll have time to brainstorm over some ideas." Ida adds, "Agreed, it'll give us ample time to decide what exactly it is that we wish to improve on our designs." Everyone replies as they nod in understanding, "Yeah." Once they finally arrive, All Might exits the bus ahead of the students, and as they exit, All Might comments looking at each of them, "They say the clothes make the pros and you young ones are proof of that." All Might explains as he looks at his script, "Now then, today we'll be taking 2 steps ahead of the program in order to get you all battle ready by breaking you up into teams of 2 randomly, heroes and villains. The heroes will need to infiltrate the building in order to either capture the villains or the nuclear weapon in their possession. However, the villains will need to capture the heroes or protect the weapon until time runs out." Ida raises his hand as he asks, "Shouldn't we be paired with people whom we have synergy with?" Izuku answers, "On the field of battle more often than not, you won't have a choice of a partner. This is to simulate the urgency so that we can work with anyone, including those we don't necessarily agree with." All Might replies, "Correct, young Izuku." All Might then randomizes the students into teams. Uraraka comments as she jumps for joy, "Wow Izuku, you and I are on the same team. It must be destiny or something." Ashido comments mischievously, "Wow Uraraka, you sure seem excited to be on Izuku's team." Uraraka turns to Ashido blushing as she replies waving her hands, no, it's nothing like that, we're just friends that's all." Ashido replies with her hands on her hips with a smirk, "Sure, that's what they all say." Uraraka covers her face in embarrassment as Izuku comments with confusion, "I think I'm missing something here." Jairu replies as she pats Izuku on the back, "Don't worry about it, Ashido's being stupid." Izuku hums as All Might reaches into a box that says, "Heroes," while the other box says, "Villains." All Might then says, "The first ones up are." All Might pulls out 2 balls that have letters on them, "These guys." Izuku and Uraraka are the heroes while Ida and Bakugo are the villains. All Might then says, "Everyone else head to the observation deck while I lead these 4 to their building." Uraraka asks as she and Izuku walk side by side following All Might, "So are you ready Izuku?" Izuku answers with a nod, affirmative. Uraraka giggles before she comments, "You sure say that a lot, huh?" Izuku replies uncertainly, "That's just one of the few things I had to say when following orders." Uraraka remembers that Izuku was a soldier before Yui as she hums feeling somewhat guilty. All Might then says as they stand before their building, "Now then, you'll be given 15 minutes to look over the blueprints of this building. This will allow you to familiarize yourself with the area while you all come up with a plan with your teammate." All Might bounds off as Ida and Bakugo go inside the building while Izuku and Uraraka look over the blueprints of the building. Uraraka asks curiously, "So do you have an idea of a plan?" Izuku answers, "I'm currently making one now. From what I can tell this building has a total of 5 floors. Considering that they're going to be protecting a nuclear weapon, they're going to have it at a higher position so that it takes us longer to get to the bomb on foot. However, the bomb won't be on the top floor since there's the chance that heroes could come from above, so that means that the bomb will likely be on the 4th floor." Uraraka comments impressed, "Wow, that's actually really smart." Izuku replies as he continues thinking of a plan, "I've had plenty of experience dealing with explosives." Uraraka wants to ask Izuku what his life was like, but feels as though now wouldn't be the appropriate time to ask him. So instead Uraraka asks, "So how should we deal with Ida and Bakugo?" Izuku hums for a moment as he thinks before he answers, "If they play it smart they'll try to surprise attack us as we draw near the bomb. They won't wait until we reach the room with the bomb since the rooms in this building are relatively small and it would be counterproductive for the bomb to get damaged. So they'll likely try to ambush us in the halls. Personally, if I were them, I'd get the capture tape at the ready and capture the enemies as soon as possible." However, Bakugo is a variable for their team since he seems to let his anger and pride get the better of him, which is why he attacked me yesterday. Bakugo also knows he can't take me on his own, further solidifying the idea he'll work with Ida, so it all comes down to whether or not they can cooperate. Uraraka asks as she looks at Izuku, "So what do you suggest we do?" Izuku explains his plan once he has it all figured out in his head. Once All Might calls for the match to begin, Izuku walks in the building alone as he says, "Alexander, scan the building for the enemy targets." Alexander replies, "On it." Alexander ping Ida, Bakugo, and Uraraka's locations with the villains showing as red and Uraraka as yellow on his radar. Izuku then makes his way up the stairs of the building, but once he reaches the 3rd flight of stairs he crouches down and activates invisibility. Izuku's boots have shock absorption in order to prevent any sound as he quietly makes his way up the stairs. It's at this point the red dots show they're on the 3rd floor. Izuku sneaks his way around the corner as his invisibility runs out, so he has to wait before it recharges so that he can activate it again. Izuku turns around another corner seeing Ida pressed up against the wall with Bakugo on the opposite corner carefully peeking out into the hall. Once Izuku gets close enough to Ida, he swiftly pulls out his capture tape before wrapping it around Ida's legs. At this point Izuku's invisibility runs out again, surprising both Ida and Bakugo. Izuku jumps away as Bakugo lunges at him, "You bstrd." Ida trips from where his legs are tied together, leaving Bakugo to battle Izuku on his own. Bakugo sends out an explosion to Izuku's helmet, causing the overshield to flash for a moment. Bakugo comments with a grin, "Don't think this will go like it did last time, this time I've got something in store for you." Izuku takes a fighting stance as he replies, "Then show me." Bakugo lunges at Izuku again, attacking with his explosions and punches, but Izuku either dodges or blocks every attack Bakugo throws at him. Bakugo continually tries to attack from different angles, thinking to himself, "This bstrd's armor has got to have a weak spot." Ida yells out, "Stop fighting him Bakugo, just capture him." Bakugo yells back, "Shut up Four Eyes, if you weren't stupid enough to get caught I might have listened to you." While Bakugo is distracted, Izuku punches him in the gut, knocking the air out of him as he comments, "Never take your eyes off the enemy." Bakugo backs away as he holds his stomach and grunts, "You bstrd, that was a cheap shot." Izuku replies, "If this were a real fight, you'd be dead. 100 times over." Bakugo stands up as he points one of his hands at Izuku, "Oh yeah, let's see how you like this." Bakugo pulls back on his grenade gauntlet to reveal a pin. All Might yells over the microphone, "Stop young Bakugo, you'll kill him." Bakugo retorts, "He'll be fine as long as he dodges." Bakugo pulls the pin, but Izuku doesn't move to dodge the explosion sent his way. The explosion blows out the wall of the building as Bakugo chuckles, "Man, those support idiots sure know how to follow directions." Ida stares in shock as he asks, "Bakugo, what did you do?" Before Bakugo can respond, they both see a giant silhouette through the cloud of smoke walking towards them as Izuku comments, "That wasn't too bad." Izuku walks through the smoke revealing his overshields are down but recharging as his armor is covered in soot. "However, I've survived worse." Bakugo yells in disbelief, How did you take that kind of attack and come out unscathed?" Izuku answers as he continues walking towards Bakugo, "My armor has an ability called Armor Lock which greatly increases my armor's shields for a short PRD of time at the cost of my armor's energy." Izuku stops, standing right in front of Bakugo, forcing him to stare up at his towering figure as he says, "So to put it simply, I barely felt a thing." Bakugo falls down in shock as he stares up at Izuku until they both hear All Might say, "The hero team wins." Bakugo snaps out of his trance as he looks down at himself, "Wait a minute, you didn't use your capture tape on me." Izuku replies, "You're right, I didn't, but Uraraka negated her gravity in order to float up to the floor where the bomb is then entered in through the window." Izuku comments as he extends a hand to Bakugo, "I'll admit your plan wasn't bad for someone so inexperienced, but you'll need to study for a few more years to beat me." Bakugo looks at Izuku's hand before he begrudgingly accepts it as Izuku helps him up, "Don't think that this is over between us, I still plan on kicking your butt and becoming the next #1 hero." Izuku replies with a nod, "I look forward to it." After the first match, everyone heads to the observation room where their classmates and All Might are waiting for them. All Might says as Izuku, Uraraka, Ida, and Bakugo stand in front of the class, "So can anyone tell me who the MVP of the match was?" Yaoyorozu raises her hand as All Might calls on her, "Yes, young Yaoyorozu." Yaoyorozu answers, "I believe Izuku would be the MVP since he was able to capture Ida and distract Bakugo long enough for Uraraka to capture the weapon. However, I would like to add that Izuku could have ended the match sooner had he just used the capture tape on Bakugo since it was clear that Izuku had the upper hand." Yaoyorozu adds, "On the other hand, it is due to Izuku's experience prior to Yui that they were able to succeed in their plan. Additionally, it is thanks to Izuku and Uraraka's faith in each other that they were able to succeed as well since it required both parties to trust one another entirely." All Might replies with a thumbs up, "Well said young Yaoyorozu." Izuku comments, "If you don't mind, I would like to add something." Izuku steps forward as he explains, "The reason I did not capture Bakugo right away was due to the fact had I done that neither he nor Uraraka would have been able to show what they were capable of. The only reason why I captured Ida was based on pure chance and nothing else since I had equal probability of capturing either of them." All Might replies as he nods in understanding, "Thank you for your explanation and your consideration young Izuku." Izuku, Uraraka, Ida, and Bakugo join the rest of the class as the next match starts. Uraraka asks worriedly, "Are you alright Izuku?" Izuku answers as he looks at Uraraka, "I'm fine, most of the damage was done to my overshield and my armor." Ida asks curiously, "What is an overshield?" Izuku answers, "It is essentially an extra layer of protection that my armor emits that assists in absorbing damage." Hagakure asks, "Does your armor have any weaknesses?" Izuku answers, "If I fall into deep water I could drown depending on whether or not water seeps into my armor." Ojiro comments slightly disturbed, "I hear that's one of the worst ways to go." Shinso adds, "With your armor being so heavy you wouldn't be able to swim." Izuku replies, "That's correct." Jairu asks curiously, "Does your armor have any other weaknesses?" Izuku hums in thought before he answers, "I know that the overshields can go down quickly if they take plasma damage." Ashido asks with a quirked eyebrow, "What's plasma damage?" Izuku answers, "It's actually a very specific type of plasma damage. The overshields work fairly well against fire, but there's a certain weapon I picked up about a year ago that can greatly damage my overshield." Zero asks somewhat worried, "What if someone tries to steal that weapon?" Izuku answers, "That weapon is currently held in a secure location along with the rest of my weapons aside from my assault rifle, magnum, and energy sword." Kaminari asks, "What about your energy sword? How many hits can your armor take before that would hurt you?" Izuku answers, "Roughly 2 or 3 times." Kaminari asks, "How did you figure that out?" Izuku has a flashback to watching his comrades and friends getting killed by elites before Izuku answers quietly, I saw it happen. Everyone glares at Kaminari, who meekly replies, sorry. Izuku shakes his head before he says in a distant tone, it's not your fault, it's just the casualties of war. Yaoyorozu gently nudges Izuku's arm as she asks carefully, are you okay? Izuku answers with a nod as he is broken out of his trance, I'm fine. The rest of the class looks at Izuku genuinely worried, even Todoroki and Bakugo are looking at Izuku with worried expressions. Once the class is over, All Might drives the students back to the main building before he says after they've all offloaded off the bus, you all did very well today, now watch as a hero makes his exit. All Might runs off as he yells, like he's got somewhere to be. Izuku comments with confusion, he is a strange man. The rest of the class nod in agreement, but due to All Might's humorous exit the tense atmosphere is slowly but surely dissipating. As the class heads to the changing rooms, Izuku says, all right, those of you who wish to upgrade your costumes please see me. With pencils and paper so that we can go over your improvements. Tsuyu says sympathetically, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Izuku replies, it would greatly improve your combat abilities as well as improve the class as a whole by making us all a single unit. Uraraka asks curiously, what do you mean? Izuku answers, it's fairly obvious that we'll be doing more exercises like the one we did today, so of course upgrading your costumes will be a top priority. However, by working together it will help build camaraderie with each other, which will improve our teamwork with one another for future exercises. Ida comments with chopping motions, I agree with you completely, that is a great idea. Besides, we did already discuss earlier what possible improvements we could use for our costumes. It is best to work these out right away so that the support course can work on them as soon as possible. The rest of the class nod in agreement, feeling lighter as they forget what Izuku had said back in the observation room. Once they've all changed back into their school uniforms and head back to their dorms, Izuku helps them with ideas about upgrading their costumes. Izuku gives ideas to work into their costumes like a heads-up display for those who already have helmets or visors. As well as pitch the idea for those who don't already have helmets and visors as part of their costumes. Izuku also advises of giving their costume materials some water resistance, cold resistance, heat resistance, and fireproof as well. He also gives ideas to increase their mobility as well as ideas for gadgets that they can use as weapons or increase the usefulness of their quirks. When Aizawa walks into the dorms, he sees all of his students gathered around in the living room pitching ideas for upgrades for their costumes. Aizawa thinks to himself, impressed, I didn't think they'd already be working on improving their costumes so quickly. For the rest of the day until curfew they continue writing down ideas for their costumes as well as possible gadgets they could use. The following day during homeroom, Aizawa stands before the entire class, alright, today you're all going to be participating in something that will decide the rest of your career. Suspension builds in the class before Aizawa states, you're going to have to decide on class representatives. The class erupts with people throwing their hands up asking to be class representatives, much to Izuku's confusion. However, Ida stops it by standing up and saying aloud, enough, the best way to decide who should be class rep should be through voting democratically. Tsuyu argues as she looks at Ida, but we've only known each other for a few days, who do we know who we can trust? Ida answers, whoever earns the most votes will have been the one to make the most impact on the entire class and thus would be best suited for class rep. Izuku counters, what if someone doesn't have the skills required for the position? The class looks at Izuku in surprise before he says, we should nominate someone who has experience and the skills necessary to take the leadership roles. Yaoyorozu adds, I agree with Izuku's idea, we should nominate those of us whom we believe would be best suited for the class rep positions, then vote accordingly. The class nod in agreement. Those who were nominated are Tsuyu, Ida, Izuku, and Yaoyorozu. Izuku and Yaoyorozu end up with a tie between the two of them, but before Yaoyorozu can say anything, Izuku says, I'd like to offer the position of class representative to Yaoyorozu. The class looks at Izuku in shock and confusion before Izuku explains, since I'm unfamiliar to school, I believe that it would be best for Yaoyorozu to take the leading position while I take the position as vice representative. The class nod in agreement and understanding, yeah, I can get behind Yaoyorozu being our representative. Plus Izuku does make a good point since this is his first time of ever actually being in a school. Yaoyorozu tears up happily before she turns to Izuku and bows, thank you for your kindness. Izuku replies as he stands at attention, I know that you will be a great leader for our class, Yaoyorozu. Afterwards Izuku takes the papers his classmates had worked on the day prior to Power Loader, who advised that he and his students will get to work on them. The rest of the day proceeds as normal. Izuku eats lunch with his entire class sitting relatively close to each other since they've gotten to know each other fairly well the day prior. The class talk amongst themselves about school and other topics that Izuku isn't familiar with yet. Izuku can't help but feel a bit anxious. Most of his life has never been peaceful, all he has ever known was war. However, that peacefulness abruptly ends when an alarm goes off. Ida asks one of the passing students, who are all in a panic, what's going on? The student answers, this is a level 3 alarm, it means someone has broken in onto UE grounds. This has never happened before in the 3 years I've been here. Before Ida can ask any further questions, the student runs off. Izuku stands up before the rest of his class as he says, we need to calm down the students before they end up hurting each other. Afterwards we need to get them evacuated in a calm and orderly fashion. Yaoyorozu adds as she stands with Izuku, right, Ida, go see what's going on, everyone else try to calm down students while I try to make a loudspeaker to gain everyone's attention. Ida nods as he goes to find out what is going on while the rest of the class goes to try and calm down the rest of the students. Once Yaoyorozu has finished making the loudspeaker, Ida reports back, it looks as though the press managed to break on campus. Yaoyorozu replies with a nod, got it. Yaoyorozu uses the loudspeaker as she talks over all the students, everyone, there is no need to be alarmed, it is just the press. Please evacuate in a calm and orderly fashion and help those who are injured. The students begin to calm down and begin following Yaoyorozu's instructions before she looks at Izuku and says with a grateful smile, thank you for taking charge, Izuku. Izuku replies with a nod, just following my duties, ma'am. Yaoyorozu and Izuku then go to assist the rest of the students in evacuating and helping those who may be injured during the panic. As the students start to file out of the building, Izuku can't help the nagging feeling in the back of his head that something is wrong. After everyone is outside, the students start coming together into groups based on their class to check roll. After Yaoyorozu confirms that all the students from Class 1A are present, Izuku says to her, I'm going to go find Aizawa and see what happened. Yaoyorozu replies with a nod, okay. Izuku walks off towards the entrance of UE, where Izuku sees reporters being taken away with the police's assistance. Izuku calls out, Aizawa. Aizawa and the rest of the staff members present turn around to see Izuku approaching. Izuku, what are you doing here? Izuku answers as he stands before them, I had a bad feeling so I came here to see what had happened, what's the status? Nedzu explains, we were just trying to figure that out ourselves, it looks as though the gate was destroyed by the use of someone's quirk. Izuku replies with a quirked eyebrow, isn't that illegal on several levels? Nedzu nods as he says, yes, it is illegal quirk use and damaging of private property. Izuku then asks, do we know if any of the reporters were responsible? Present Mike answers, according to the reporter's testimony, some guy in a black hoodie came up to the gate and destroyed it. Izuku then asks, was the suspect apprehended? Midnight answers as she shakes her head, unfortunately no, shortly after they destroyed the gate they just disappeared. Nedzu then asks curiously, what do you think, Izuku? Izuku hums thoughtfully as he places his hand on his chin, clearly the person who did this was a villain, but for him to disappear so quickly would require the use of another quirk. Which means at minimum that there are 2 villains involved, but I doubt that it is just 2 villains who are involved. It's likely that we're dealing with an organized group of villains, as for their reason for attacking I'm not sure. However, considering that this is UE, I doubt this will be their only attack. From a strategic standpoint, it doesn't make sense to simply destroy UE's gate as a display of power, since they barely gain anything from that other than an anonymous headline saying, villain destroyed UE gate, which could be attributed to anyone. Izuku continues as his thoughts start to come together, if it were me I'd use the reporters as a distraction in order to infiltrate UE to perform either an assassination or recon mission. We'll have to check the premises in case if they came here for an assassination, but I doubt that is their goal. I believe that they broke onto UE campus to get information and they'll likely attack again soon while our defenses are still weak. Nedzu starts to applaud as he and the rest of the staff stare, impressed by Izuku's argument. Well done, Izuku, clearly you are an asset UE can rely on for future assistance. Izuku nods as he replies gratefully, thank you, sir. Nedzu then says, I'll have the robots perform a sweep over the entire campus before the end of the day. Nedzu then says as he turns to the staff currently with him, I want everyone to keep this information away from the students and also assist in checking all our documents to see what information the villains could have taken or copied. The staff replies as they nod in understanding, yes sir. Izuku asks, what should we inform the students? Nedzu answers as he looks back at Izuku, right now what the students need more than anything is a peace of mind, inform them that the reporters have been taken away by the police and withhold any further information. Izuku replies with a nod, understood. Izuku walks back to his class as they all wait for him. Yaoyorozu asks curiously, so what happened? Izuku answers carefully, the reporters got on campus, the gate was destroyed and the police have taken them all away for interrogation. Bakugo comments angrily, "Fing vultures." Kaminari adds with a huff, "Don't these idiots know that quirk use is illegal and could get people hurt if they aren't careful?" The class then falls into a conversation about quirk use as well as how annoying the press can be by distorting the truth. Izuku continues thinking of what the villains could have possibly taken if they came for information. However, Izuku does his best not to telegraph what he's thinking, but that isn't too difficult since he isn't very expressive in the first place. Still though, Izuku does his best to hide his thoughts so that the rest of his classmates don't get suspicious. Afterwards Aizawa comes by to tell them all to go back inside and finish their lunches before they head to their next class. Uraraka asks as she walks with Izuku, "So Izuku, you've been pretty quiet today, is there something on your mind?" Izuku answers as he looks at Uraraka, "I'm fine, just still getting used to the school lifestyle." Uraraka asks somewhat sadly, "Was it hard being part of the Spartan program?" Izuku answers after a moment, "It wasn't easy, it was almost constant training and very few breaks in between. Honestly, for the past year it's been peaceful, but that peacefulness just seems to put me on edge as if I'm just waiting for something bad to happen." Shinso comments sympathetically, "That must be pretty rough for you if you're always on high alert." Yaoyorozu adds, "It does make sense, since you've never known anything other the Spartan program and battles it would make sense you would suffer some symptoms of PTSD. Izuku hums in agreement as they continue back to the lunchroom. They quickly finish their lunch before they head for their next class. After school Izuku walks with Uraraka, Ida, Shinso, and Yaoyorozu. Uraraka asks curiously, "So Izuku, what do you think about the press breaking in on campus?" Izuku answers as he looks at Uraraka, "I believe that they should be punished for what they did was unprofessional and could have gotten someone hurt." Ida nods as he replies, "I agree, what they did was completely reckless." Yaoyorozu adds, "I understand that All Might is a big deal, but breaking in on Yui property seems a bit excessive if you ask me." Suddenly they hear someone call out, "Hey Izuku." Izuku looks behind to see Kirishima running up to him, "Hey bro, do you mind if you train me today?" Izuku answers as he shakes his head, "I don't mind." Shinso comments, "I could use some training as well." Uraraka adds excitedly, "Yeah, could you train me too?" Yaoyorozu suggests, "How about we have the whole class do a training session when we get back to the dorms?" Ida replies with chopping motions, "That is an excellent idea Yaoyorozu." Shinso asks as he looks at Izuku, "Are you up for training our whole class?" Izuku answers with a nod, affirmative, "The sooner our class is prepared the better off we'll be." Shinso can't help but feel as though there is a deeper meaning behind Izuku's words, but doesn't press on it. Back at the dorms Yaoyorozu stands before the class with Izuku by her side, "All right, those of you who wish to train this afternoon raise your hands." Majority of the class raise their hands with the exception of Todoroki. Yaoyorozu then says, "All right, we will be training for an hour before dinner, that should give us enough time." Yaoyorozu asks as she looks at Izuku, "What do you think Izuku?" Izuku answers with a nod, "That should be enough time to make some improvements." Izuku then says as he looks over his classmates while Todoroki heads for the stairs, "All right everyone, head outside." Izuku leads his classmates outside, "All right, everyone spread out and give each other some room." His classmates does so as Izuku recalls how his drill sergeant was, but has to remind himself that his classmates are civilians, not soldiers. Izuku says, "First things first, we need to start with some warm-up exercises, everyone start doing jumping jacks." Izuku's classmates begin to do so. After Izuku's classmates are done with the warm-up exercises Izuku says, "All right, now that you're all warmed up I want you all to give me 3 sets of 10 push-ups." Izuku's classmates drop to the ground and begin doing push-ups with Izuku walking around checking their form. Izuku advises as he passes some of his classmates, "Keep your back straight. Spread your palms further apart. Don't let your stomach touch the ground." After their push-ups are done, quite a few of them are already sweating and panting. Izuku says, "All right, now I want you all to give me 3 sets of 10 squats." Izuku's classmates does as he says again as they all begin doing squats with him going around and giving them advice on their forms. Izuku then has his classmates get into groups of 2 in order to do 3 sets of 10 sit-ups before they go on a kilometer run. By the end of their training session ends with their cool-down exercises. Izuku applauds his class as he says, "Well done, all of you." Ashido asks as she's panting, "Why, didn't you join us?" Izuku answers as he looks at Ashido, "If I had then I wouldn't have been able to help some of you with your forms. I also already did my training this morning while all of you were still asleep." Kaminari asks after he chugged his bottle of water, "When did you wake up?" Izuku answers as he looks at Kaminari, "Oh, 400. Jairu asks incredulously, you woke up at 4 in the morning. Izuku nods as he answers, in the Spartan program we had a strict drill sergeant who would always wake us up early in the morning to start training. Ever since I came to UE, Alexander would wake me up every other day for early morning training to keep me fit. Zero comments as he wipes the sweat from his forehead, man, I can't imagine what that must have been like. Izuku replies, the Spartan program was put in place to create the best soldiers, so of course they couldn't go easy on us, otherwise it would have been pointless. Yaoyorozu says as she claps her hands, gaining everyone's attention, alright everyone, let's get washed up before we eat dinner. The class nods in agreement, as Izuku passes by. Yaoyorozu puts her hand on his shoulder, smiling at him, thank you for your help, Izuku. Izuku looks at Yaoyorozu before nods with a small smile, you're welcome, Yaoyorozu. The day after school proceeds as normal, all the classes were the same as they were the day before. Except during Foundational Heroics, Aizawa comes into their classroom, alright everyone, today we're going to be going on a field trip to a facility on campus. The teachers there are going to be All Might, myself, and one other UE staff member. You can either wear your hero suits or your gym uniforms. Meet me outside in 15 minutes. Izuku and his classmates stand up as they say in unison, yes sir. Kaminari asks as they walk down the hall to the changing rooms, so where do you guys think they'll be taking us? Tsuyu answers, probably to one of the other cities on campus. Shinso comments, wouldn't Aizawa have just told us that we'd be going to one of the cities if that were the case? Hagakure replies, somewhat annoyed, yeah, but don't forget Aizawa pulled a logical ruse on us on our first day here. Shinso nods before he says, you got me there. Ashido asks as she looks at Izuku, what do you think, Izuku? Do you think we're going to a city or somewhere else? Izuku answers, I'm not sure, but I don't believe it matters as much as simply doing our best to pass whatever is thrown at us. Ida comments, what Izuku says is very true. As long as we are able to pass, then where they take us does not matter. Uraraka looks at Izuku. For some reason she feels as though Izuku is hiding something ever since yesterday, although she isn't sure why. She then dismisses her thoughts. Izuku is probably still just adjusting to normal school life. All of Class 1A meet Aizawa in front of a bus in their hero costumes, with Izuku carrying his assault rifle, magnum, and energy sword along with some grenades. Alright everyone, get on the bus. All of the students follow after Aizawa onto the bus and take their seats. As the bus drives off, the class starts to talk amongst themselves. Halfway through the drive, Tsuyu says, Izuku. Izuku looks at Tsuyu as he replies, yes Azui? Tsuyu answers, call me Tsuyu. Izuku nods as Tsuyu says, I usually just say whatever comes to my mind, but you remind me a bit of All Might. Izuku replies, somewhat confused, really? Kirishima answers excitedly, yeah bro, I mean you're both really huge, really buff, really strong guys. Plus your armor just makes you stronger. I mean I'm sure All Might would win, but you would definitely give him a run for his money. Izuku hums thoughtfully at being compared to All Might as Kirishima comments, honestly, I wish I was half as strong as you. Kirishima shows off his quirk by hardening his arm, my quirk isn't really all that flashy or strong. Izuku replies as he looks at Kirishima's arm, I disagree. Kirishima looks at Izuku in surprise, your quirk isn't much different from my armor, and unlike me you have it on you at all times. Plus, I only got this strong from training. I don't have any superpowers or anything like that except for genetic enhancements. The fact is, without the Spartan program I wouldn't even be half as strong as you are now. Kaminari asks as he and the rest of the class stare at Izuku in abject horror, did you say, genetic enhancements? It's only then that Izuku realizes he said too much. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Bakugu asks as he glares angrily at Izuku, just what the hell did those fuckers do to you? Izuku answers as he looks at Bakugu, please just forget I said anything. Jairu comments, you can't honestly expect any of us to just forget that. Aizawa told us you went through hell, but that wasn't what I was expecting to hear. Izuku replies softly, can we please just drop it? Though Izuku's classmates feel worried for how Izuku's life had been up to now, they're more angry at the people who had hurt him instead. Even Todoroki, who is one of the most stoic people in the entire class, can't help but feel angry after hearing what Izuku had just told them. However, none of them press any further into Izuku's history as he requested. Shortly afterwards the bus stops as Aizawa stands at the front of the bus, alright everyone, we're here. Aizawa and the students unload of the bus to see a giant dome building in front of them. Fortunately this is enough of a distraction to shake the students out of the depressed atmosphere. Whoa, this place is so cool. Aizawa says as he stands in front of the class, alright everyone, head inside. The students walk past Aizawa as they go to enter the building, but Aizawa stops Izuku as he places his hand on his shoulder. Aizawa asks carefully, are you alright Izuku? Izuku nods as he answers, I'm fine sir. Izuku continues walking towards the building with Aizawa watching after him before he follows. As the class enters the building, they're even more awed by the interior. This place is amazing. 13 walks up to the class as they say, "Thank you, I built it myself." Uraraka starts vibrating excitedly as she says, "Oh my god, it's 13, they're my favorite hero." 13 explains in front of the class, "This here is the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or the USJ for short." The entire class except for Izuku think it's just like Universal Studios of Japan. 13 continues, "I built this facility to help teach students about rescue missions. We have the Shipwreck Zone, Conflagration Zone, Landslide, and many other zones to help train you. However, before we begin I would like to inform you all of something." The students pay attention to 13 as they continue with their speech. 13 holds up their index finger. "As some of you may know, my quirk is called Black Hole, and because of it I have been able to rescue many civilians." Uraraka nods excitedly before 13 says, "However, my quirk can just as easily kill as much as it can save." This stops the class's excitement. "Before any of you can graduate from UE you must understand that you must use your quirks carefully or else you could hurt someone." 13 then bows as they say, "Anyways, that's the end of my speech." Aizawa walks up to 13 as he asks, "Where's All Might? Wasn't he supposed to be here today?" 13 quietly answers as they hold up 3 fingers. Unfortunately he used up all his time on his way to work. Aizawa sighs as he comments, "That man is the height of irrationality." Aizawa then turns to the class as he explains, "Unfortunately All Might isn't here, so you're all going to be divided into 2 groups. Before Aizawa could continue any further, a red dot appears on Izuku's radar. "Aizawa, we've got enemy targets." Aizawa turns around to see a black and purple mist in front of the fountain at the central plaza. Kirishima steps forward as he looks down at the plaza. "What's that?" Aizawa holds out his arm stopping Kirishima as the mist widens and people begin pouring out. "Those are villains." Izuku asks Alexander, "Can you tell me how many there are?" Alexander answers after a moment, "I'm not sure of the exact number, but it looks as though they have enough for a small army." Aizawa orders as he puts on his goggles, 13, "Get the students out of here." Izuku calls out as he notices Aizawa heading for the stairs. "Aizawa, this isn't your specialty, you specialize in surprise attacks and takedowns, not a full-on battle." Aizawa replies as he looks over his shoulder at Izuku, "You can't be a hero if you're just a one-trick pony." Before Aizawa leaps down the staircase, Izuku suddenly recalls Spartan 117, 13 orders, "Everybody evacuate now." The entire class heads for the door, but are stopped by the mist villain. "Unfortunately, I can't let you escape." The mist villain then says, narrowing his glowing yellow eyes, "We apologize for intruding into this haven of heroes, however we were informed All Might would be here." 13 stands between the villain and the students as they say with their index finger pointed at the villain, "Everyone stay behind me." Unfortunately Bakugo and Kirishima rush the villain with their attacks. "We got him." The villain comments as the smoke disappears, "It seems the next generation of heroes are quite powerful." Bakugo and Kirishima stare at the villain in shock as he spreads out his mist. "Be gone." The mist envelopes most of the class and sends them to different locations throughout the facility. Izuku crashes down in the mountain zone along with Yaoyorozu and Jairu. Izuku stands up in the small crater his fall created. Izuku looks at his classmates, "Are you two alright?" Yaoyorozu and Jairu dust themselves off. "Yeah, I think we're fine." Izuku notices red dots appearing on his radar. "Eyes up, we've got villains." Yaoyorozu and Jairu both notice villains coming around from the rock formations backing Izuku and them up against a wall. Izuku pulls out his magnum as he points it at the approaching villains. "Stay back or I will shoot you." One of the villains scoff, "You really think we're scared of some rubber bullets?" The same villain takes a step forward before Izuku shoots him in the shoulder, causing the villain to stumble back holding his shoulder. "Ow, what the F dash?" Izuku replies, "Stand down, final warning." One of the villains asks, "What kind of school lets students use real guns?" Another villain answers with a grin, "Doesn't matter, he can't kill us if he still wants to be a hero." Izuku stares at the villain before he puts his magnum away and says, "You're right, I can't kill you." The villains start closing in on them, but Izuku steps forward meeting them head-on. "However, you're going to wish I would." Izuku rushes towards the villain in front of him as he throws a right hook at his face while simultaneously kicking the villain next to him with his left foot with a spin kick while also kicking another villain with his right foot as he lands, sending all 3 of them crashing into their fellow villains. Izuku cracks his knuckles as he pps his head side to side, popping his neck before he takes a fighting stance. "Who's next?" The villains surround Izuku before they all charge at him. However, Izuku begins taking them all out by punching them in the face, kicking them back when they get behind him, grabbing them by their heads and slamming them together. At one point Izuku kicks a villain in the abdomen, causing him to fall backwards, only for Izuku to pick him up by his leg and use him as a weapon to take down some other villains. Afterwards Izuku spins around before throwing the villain currently being held by his ankle in his right hand at a group of villains, knocking them all down. Thanks to Izuku's training, the villains are dropping like flies. Izuku rushes one of them and delivers some jabs at his chest, causing him to fall over before Izuku raises his fist and punches the villain in the groin before kicking him at some approaching villains. Some villains start to recover before Izuku rushes towards them at full speed and taking 3 of them out with one punch as they all line up perfectly. Jairu asks as she leans over to Yaoyorozu, "Do you think we should help?" Izuku grabs a villain by the neck before slamming his head into his knee as Yaoyorozu answers, leaning over to Jairu, "I think he's got this." One villain pushes himself up on his hands before Izuku stomps down on his back, breaking his spine, causing the villain to cry out in pain. One of the villains cry out in fear, "He's a demon." Izuku walks towards the villain as he says, "I'm a soldier, I'm a warrior, I am a Spartan." Izuku walks up the villain before knocking him out with a single punch to the face. Izuku turns to his classmates. While Izuku has his back turned, a villain who was camouflaged against a rock rushes towards him, but Izuku catches the villain by the throat before lifting him up in the air. The villain kicks uselessly as he tries to pry Izuku's hand off. How were you able to detect me?" Izuku answers as he taps his helmet with his free hand, "My radar didn't pick you up until you rushed at me." Izuku tightens his grip against the villain's throat. "If my friends weren't here, I would have killed every single one of you without hesitation or mercy." The villain's eyes widen as Izuku says, bringing the villain's face closer to his visor, "I'm not a hero, I am a soldier." The villain falls limp as he passes out from the lack of oxygen before Izuku tosses him aside. Izuku says as he looks at Yaoyorozu and Jairu, "I believe that's all of them, you all need to evacuate immediately." Yaoyorozu asks worriedly, "What about you?" Izuku answers as he walks off, "They started this fight and I'm going to finish it." Jairu asks with a blush as Izuku walks off, "Is it just me or was that kind of hot?" Yaoyorozu looks at Jairu incredulously, "Jairu?" Jairu replies defensively, "Hey, you can't tell me that seeing Izuku take on a whole group of villains wasn't awesome." Yaoyorozu says with a blush, "Well yes, but you didn't have to say it." Jairu replies, "I just had to know." Izuku asks as he makes his way down the mountain, "Alexander, can you get into contact with Yui?" Alexander answers after a moment, "Unfortunately I can't, it seems as though something or someone is jamming the signal." Izuku comments, "Wouldn't Power Loader be wondering why you aren't responding in the studio?" Alexander replies, "It's possible, but I doubt that he would assume that the connection between your armor and Yui had been disconnected. Besides, they've operated without my assistance for years, so I doubt they even need my help." Izuku then says, "Which means we need to get someone to inform the staff that villains are attacking the USJ." Alexander replies, "That's about it." Izuku comments as he makes his way to the central plaza, "I hope 13 managed to evacuate the class." Uraraka stood with her classmates that didn't get warped. The ones who got warped were Izuku, Yaoyorozu, Jairu, Tsuyu, Shinso, Kaminari, Ojiro, Hagakure, Todoroki, Koda, Tokoyami, Aoyama, Bakugu, and Kirishima. 13 stands between the students and the warp villain as he hums, "I was hoping to send more of you to your doom, but no matter. None of you will be escaping from here anyway." 13 asks as the students get behind them, "Who are you and what do you want?" The villain's glowing yellow eyes narrow in what seems to be amusement, "What do we want?" The villain answers, "We are the League of Villains and we are here to kill All Might." The students gulp as one of them says quietly, "Kill All Might?" The villain comments, "Although it seems as though he isn't here at the moment." The villain looks at 13, "You wouldn't happen to know where is right now, would you?" 13 pops the cap off their index finger as they point it at the villain, activating their quirk, "Like I would tell you." 13's black hole quirk begins sking the mist villain in, but he's resisting against the pull. Some of the students cheer, "Yeah 13, you got him." It seems as though 13 has the villain, but that moment of cheer soon ends when a warp gate opens behind 13 and in front of the villain. Due to the warp gates, 13's own quirk begins to destroy themselves. Ida yells out, "13, stop your quirk now." 13 closes the cap on their finger before promptly collapsing, much to the horror of quite a few students. The villain then says in a menacing tone, "None of you will be escaping from me." Ashido and Uraraka rush to 13's side with tears in their eyes. 13. Ida glares at the villain as he thinks to himself, "We need to get out of here and notify the staff." Ida then looks down, think Tenya, what would Izuku do in a situation like this? Ida looks over his classmates, Uraraka, Ashido, Shiro, Sato, and Shoji. 13 is too injured to fight against this villain, which means it's left to us to escape from here. Ida then begins to formulate a plan as he rushes over to Uraraka's side. Uraraka, I've got a plan, but I'm going to need your help. Uraraka wipes the tears from her eyes as she looks at Ida. What do you need me to do? The villain comments as the students start gathering together. Whatever plan you're going to come up with won't work. If any of you try to make a break for the exit, I'll warp you somewhere else before you can reach the door. Ida turns to the villain with a determined glare as he replies, we'll see about that. Ida revs up his engines as before he speeds off towards the door at incredible speeds. The villain sends his mist after Ida. No you don't. As the villain has his back turned to the rest of the students, Uraraka sees his metallic neck brace and grabs it, negating the villain's gravity. Uraraka yells as she throws the villain with all her strength. Zero. As the villain is sent flying through the air, Zero shoots out his tape to the villain's neck brace before handing the tape to Sato, who swings the villain around, building up momentum before slinging him across the USJ. Ida bursts through the door at breakneck speed, heading for the school to inform the teachers as the villain thinks, DMN, he got away. Zero then rushes over to 13 with the rest of the students. Help me patch up 13's suit. Everyone nods in understanding as Zero supplies them with enough tape to repair the gaping hole in 13's suit. Meanwhile, Izawa starts taking down villains left and right with ease by erasing their quirks, capturing them with his scarf, then knocking them out. The leader of the League of Villains stands at the back scratching his neck irritably as he comments, Eraserhead is so cool, who would have thought he could take on so many people at once. Izawa thinks to himself as his eyes begin to sting from overusing his quirk, DMN it, I'm running out of time and I haven't even taken down the big ones yet. Suddenly the leader rushes towards Izawa, which he manages to block, but when he blinks his costume begins to decay along with the skin on his elbow. Izawa jumps away holding his arm to try and stop the bleeding as the leader comments, when I was watching you I noticed that your hair stood up, telling me when you were activating your quirk. After that I began to count the time it would take for your quirk to deactivate. Once I found that your time was decreasing, all I had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. Izawa grunts in frustration and pain before the villain says, by the way, I'm not the one you should be worried about. Izawa feels a presence behind him as he looks over his shoulder to see the beaked villain, who then slams his face into the pavement. Unfortunately, they have an audience. Tsuyu, Shinso, and Kaminari stand at the edge of the shipwreck zone watching in horror as their teacher's skull gets beaten into the concrete. Kaminari says quietly with wide eyes, no way, this can't be happening. Shinso trembles as he says, no way, Izawa can't die here. The mist villain appears beside the leader as he says, Shigaraki, I was able to warp many of the students to different locations, but it seems that the remaining ones came up with a plan to get past me and escaped. Shigaraki begins scratching at his neck furiously, DMN Yukiro Jairi, if you weren't our only exit right now I'd kill you. Shigaraki suddenly stops before he sighs, no point in continuing any further if they're just going to bring a bunch of heroes, let's go home. Kaminari asks hopefully with tears pricking his eyes, do you really think they're going to leave? Tsuyu comments, why would they come so far just to leave? Shigaraki then says, but before we go, let's crush some of these hero hopefuls. Shigaraki rushes towards the shipwreck zone with his hand outstretched reaching for Tsuyu, but after 2 gunshots Shigaraki falls to the floor crying out in pain just out of reach with bullet holes in both of his legs. Tsuyu, Shinso, Kaminari, Kurojairi, the rest of the villains, and a barely conscious Izawa look up to see Izuku with his smoking magnum in his hand. Izuku comments, the only reason I didn't aim for your head is because I'd rather avoid my classmates experiencing that kind of trauma. Shigaraki growls out from the floor, who the hell are you? Izuku answers as he puts away his magnum and walks towards the villains. Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf. The villains rush at Izuku, but Izuku charges at the villains with his arms out in the form of a lariat, slamming the villains head first onto concrete. Some other villains rush towards Izuku, but he simply jabs them in the face before spinning them around and kicking them into their allies before grabbing the villain by the ankle and beating his allies with him. After all the villains are taken down, Izuku tosses the villain in his hand to the side before he cracks his knuckles and asks, who's next? Tsuyu, Shinso, and Kaminari stare at Izuku in shock before Shigaraki yells out, Numu, kill this brat. The Numu charges towards Izuku. Just as Izuku charges at it, Izuku grabs the Numu's fists as it tries to attack him. The ground beneath Izuku begins to crack as he holds back the Numu with all his strength, even with his suit's help. Shigaraki laughs as he pushes himself up off the ground. Numu was genetically engineered to kill All Might. He has shock absorption, regeneration, and plenty of other quirks to kill him. Izuku asks sarcastically, is that right? Izuku jumps back as he releases his hold on Numu's fists, allowing them to crash into the floor before Izuku rushes towards it, wrapping his arm around its neck as he jumps over it. Izuku pulls the Numu back by his throat before snapping its neck, allowing it to fall out of his hold before Izuku asks, turning to Shigaraki, can it come back from that? Tsuyu yells in fear, Izuku, watch out. In the short time Izuku had his back turned, the Numu not only managed to snap its neck back into place, but also was ready to attack. The Numu punches Izuku in the gut, sending him flying. Just as he turns around, Izuku crashes into the stairs, creating a small crater. Shigaraki cackles as he says, I already told you, Numu has regeneration, you can't kill him. Izuku steps out of the crater before he pops his neck and rotates his shoulders. He's strong. Izuku then pulls out a frag grenade. I've killed stronger. Izuku and the Numu charge at each other again. Izuku allows the Numu to grab hold of his chest as he raises him in the air. Izuku pulls the pin on his frag grenade as he pries the Numu's jaws open and tosses the grenade down its throat. The Numu slams Izuku into the ground, creating an imprint of his armor before raising him up again before blowing up his entire upper half, sending out bile and gore across the floor. Everyone present stares at Izuku in shock as he's covered in blood, with the lower half of the Numu falling in front of him. Come back from that. Shigaraki yells in frustration, no, you can't have killed my Numu. Izuku stalks towards Shigaraki as he comments, that thing wasn't my first kill and I doubt it will be my last. Shigaraki asks furiously, just what kind of hero kills people? Izuku answers coldly, a war hero. Shigaraki's eyes widen before he calls out, Kurojairi, we need to leave now. Kurojairi surrounds Shigaraki with his mist before he says, this isn't over, I will come back to kill you and All Might. As Shigaraki and Kurojairi disappear, Izuku falls to one knee as he heaves a sigh of relief. Tsuyu rushes towards Izuku as she gets out of the water. Izuku, are you alright? Izuku answers, looking down at the ground, I'm fine, just a bit exhausted from fighting all those villains. Izuku then says as he looks over at the barely conscious Aizawa, take Aizawa to the exit, try to stop his bleeding as best you can before recovery girl gets here. Tsuyu looks over at Aizawa before she asks, looking at Izuku, what about you? Izuku answers, still looking at the ground, I'll be fine, I just need a minute to catch my breath. Tsuyu gulps as she gets Kaminari and Shinso to help her take Aizawa up the stairs to the exit. Izuku takes off his helmet, breathing slowly. Izuku says to himself as he closes his eyes, it's over now. Yaoyorozu calls out as she and Jairu rush towards Izuku. Izuku, are you okay? Izuku looks up at them running towards him before he answers, yeah, I'm fine. Jairu comments as she and Yaoyorozu stop in front of the kneeling Izuku, we saw you take out those villains and that thing. Are you sure you're okay? Izuku nods before he stands up with his helmet tucked under his arm. I'm fine, I've been through worse. Yaoyorozu replies worriedly, that doesn't make us feel any better. Izuku says as he looks away, sorry, I'm still not used to this yet. Yaoyorozu says as she smiles gently, it's okay Izuku, we understand. Jairu comments, we should probably head for the exit and see if there's anything we can do to help. Izuku nods as he replies, agreed. Just as their conversation ends, the doors burst open at the entrance as they hear, never fear, because I am here. All Might jumps down to the central plaza to see a bunch of fallen villains along with the remains of the Numu. All Might asks as he looks at his students, what happened here? Izuku answers, a group of villains managed to infiltrate the USJ, after which Aizawa went to engage the enemy. However, one of the villains by the name of Kurojairi appeared before us, likely with some form of teleportation quirk. Afterwards he warped us to different areas of the USJ where there were more villains waiting for us. We managed to take down all the villains in our area before we decided to head for the central plaza where Aizawa was fighting. Jairu comments, if by we you mean you, then I agree. All Might looks at Jairu for a moment before looking back at Izuku as he continues, when I arrived at the scene I saw Aizawa being attacked by what the leader, Shigaraki, called a Numu. According to him, it was genetically engineered to kill you with shock absorption, regeneration, and various other quirks. All Might's eyes widen for a moment. It was stronger than me, but I managed to hold it off long enough to formulate a plan. I've dealt with creatures similar to the Numu, so I figured the best way to kill it would be by using a grenade. I pried the Numu's jaws open before I tossed a frag down its throat before it slammed me into the ground and blew up. Izuku then says as he lowers his head, unfortunately, Shigaraki and Kurojairi managed to escape before I could apprehend them. All Might then says comfortingly, it's alright young Izuku, you did everything you could to protect your fellow classmates and save your teacher. Izuku then says as he looks All Might in the eyes, I could have taken Shigaraki out, but I let my emotions override my instinct. All Might says as he turns fully towards Izuku, young man, you did what you thought was necessary, the fact you ignored your instincts proves that you're more than just a soldier. All Might places his hands on Izuku's shoulder as he says, looking him in the eyes, young man, you are human. Izuku feels his heart thump in his chest as he feels something he has never felt before. Was it pride, comfort, gratitude? Izuku honestly isn't sure what this feeling is, so he simply nods. Thank you, sir. All Might then says, looking at Yaoyorozu, I'll head for the other zones to see if any of your other classmates are there. All Might bounds off as Yaoyorozu grabs Izuku's hand and leads him to the exit with a smile. Come on Izuku, we should go, All Might will take care of things from here. Jiru adds as she walks by Izuku's side, yeah, everything's going to be fine now. Izuku lets out a small smile as he replies, of course. As Izuku walks with Yaoyorozu and Jiru, he quietly says, thank you. As they reach the top of the stairs, Uraraka rushes towards Izuku. Izuku, thank God you're okay. Izuku is taken aback by Uraraka's outburst as he arrived. Yeah, thank you. Izuku clears his throat as he asks, what's the status? Zero answers as he walks up to Izuku. 13's suit has been repaired, but none of us here know if they're going to be okay until Recovery Girl arrives. Zero then says Ida managed to come up with a plan to get that mist villain out of the way so he could escape and notify the UE staff. As for Aizawa, we've been trying to stop the bleeding as best as we can, but considering how badly he's beaten, I'm not sure if there's anything we can do. Izuku turns to Yaoyorozu as he asks, Yaoyorozu, can you produce a med kit and a pillow for me? Yaoyorozu nods in understanding as she answers, yes sir. Izuku says as he walks over to Aizawa, I've dealt with head wounds before, so I'll take it from here. As Yaoyorozu creates a pillow, Izuku places it beneath Aizawa's head before he starts to bandage Aizawa's wounds as best as he can. Luckily, Recovery Girl and the rest of the UE staff members arrive shortly after along with a bunch of police officers with prison buses and ambulances. Izuku informs Recovery Girl of Aizawa's current condition and what all he had done to try to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, Shigaraki falls through Kurogiri's warp gate onto the hardwood floor of his bar. A voice from a monitor asks, did it go well, Shigaraki? Shigaraki answers angrily as he slams his fist onto the floorboard, no master, All Might wasn't even there when we arrived. Master comments, I see, that's disappointing, where's the Numu at? Kurogiri answers, the Numu was killed by someone who calls himself Forest Wolf. Master replies curiously, Forest Wolf, I've never heard that hero's name before. Shigaraki adds, he called himself Spartan 715 and said that his code name was Forest Wolf. Master asks, he calls himself a Spartan? Shigaraki asks as he looks up at the monitor, what does it mean, Master? Master hums for a moment before answers, Sparta was a warrior society in ancient Greece that reached the height of its power after defeating the rival city-state Athens. Spartan culture centered around loyalty to the state and military service. At the age of 7, Spartan boys would enter a rigorous military training. To put it simply, Spartans were known for their incredible strength and battle prowess in times of war. Kurogiri then asks, so then why would someone call themselves a Spartan? Master hums thoughtfully before he answers, considering this person managed to kill Numu, I would assume that he was trained to fight at a young age mercilessly. Shigaraki then says as he makes his way to a nearby chair, so this brat, he was trained from a young age to fight against villains? Master answers, it is very likely. Shigaraki growls angrily before Master says, however, this provides us an opportunity. Shigaraki and Kurogiri look at the screen as Master explains, if we can shift Forest Wolf's loyalty to our side, then he would be a great asset to our league. Shigaraki smiles as he replies in understanding, yes, I see what you mean, Master. If he was able to kill Numu so easily, then maybe he'll be able to kill All Might as well. Master then says, we'll need to pay close attention to the upcoming sports festival to see what his capabilities are. After the students of Class 1A give their reports to the police, they're immediately taken back to their dorms even though they're still in their hero suits. Present Mike says in the lobby in front of the students, now then, I know you all are worried for Shoyuta, but don't worry, I'll be giving you all updates as I get them, okay? Everyone nods in understanding before Present Mike claps his hands with a smile, now then, I suggest you all get washed up and changed. After today's incident there won't be school tomorrow, so feel free to relax as much as you want. Even though Present Mike is smiling, Izuku can tell that he's extremely worried for his friend, but Izuku understands that he's only smiling so that the students feel calm and safe. Izuku says as his classmates head for the stairs, I'm going to wash my suit outside. Uraraka asks as she looks at Izuku, do you want some help? Izuku shakes his head as he answers, no, I think I'll be fine. Uraraka frowns as Izuku walks outside before Tsuyu says by her side, don't worry Ochako, Izuku just needs time to himself for a while. Uraraka looks at Tsuyu before she nods, still not liking the idea, yeah, I know, I just wish I could help him, you know. Izuku stands outside beside the dorms next to a hose hooked up to a faucet. Izuku then starts taking off his armor piece by piece, leaving him in just his tank top and boxers. Izuku turns on the faucet as he grabs the hose and begins washing the blood off his armor. As he does so, he recalls the Numu slamming Aizawa's head into the concrete floor. He recalls how Shigaraki rushed towards his classmates. He feels the phantom pains from when the Numu punched him and slammed him into the ground. He recalls of his many battles against the Covenant, fighting them all off as his comrades died around him and fighting all on his own. He recalls the red and blue blood he would have to wash off his armor after every single battle. Suddenly he hears, "Hey!" Izuku quickly reaches down for where his magnum should be before turning around and pointing at Jairu, who puts her hands up. Izuku looks at his empty hand that looked as though he was holding his gun before he lowered it along with his head. "Sorry, I shouldn't have done that." Jairu replies as she lowers her arms, "It's alright, I get it." Jairu walks up to Izuku as she looks up at him. "Today's been a pretty rough day for you too, hasn't it?" Izuku answers with a nod, looking away from Jairu, "Yeah, it has." Jairu comments as she goes to lean against the nearby wall, "You've been out here for a while, most of us have already cleaned up and gotten changed." Izuku asks, still looking down, "Have I really been out here for that long?" Jairu answers, "Well, considering you were kind of zoning out when I got here, I'm not too surprised." Izuku hums before looking down at his armor to see that all the blood has been washed off, but it quickly flashes where all the blood used to be. Izuku comments, "I guess I just wasn't expecting to go into battle again so soon." Jairu looks at Izuku sympathetically, "You've seen a lot of crap, huh?" Izuku answers with a nod, "Yeah." Jairu thinks for a moment before she supplies, "You know, when I want to take my mind off of things, I just listen to my music." Izuku looks at Jairu curiously, "Music?" Jairu answers, "Yeah, when I'm feeling down or stressed, I just put in my earbuds and listen to music. Sometimes I'll even imagine my own music videos." Jairu then says as she looks away with a slight blush, "Of course that doesn't mean it'll work for you like it does for me, but maybe you could find something to sort of take your mind off of things, you know." Izuku hums thoughtfully before he asks, "Do you mind if I listen to some of your music?" Jairu looks at Izuku in surprise before her blush deepens. Normally she would reject something like that, but considering the circumstances she reluctantly answers, "Sure, I can let you listen to my music." Izuku smiles gratefully as he replies, "Thank you, Jairu." Jairu says as she looks away from Izuku, "If I'm going to let you listen to my music, then you can at least call me Kyoka." Izuku looks at Jairu for a moment before he nods, "Okay, Kyoka." Jairu won't admit to anyone that she feels happy that Izuku would call her by her first name. Jairu shakes the blush from her face before she says, "We should probably get inside. You still need to take a shower and get changed while your armor dries off." Izuku turns to Jairu as he nods, "Right." Jairu smirks for a moment before she looks down and see that Izuku's boxers has a large bulge. It takes her a moment for her to process before she turns around with a blood-red face and runs back inside the dorm, leaving a very confused Izuku. Izuku turns off the faucet as he lays down the hose and heads inside, where he sees some of his classmates sitting on the couches in the living room. Kirishima calls out when he sees Izuku with a wave, "Hey bro." Izuku waves back, "Hey." Kaminari asks as he looks at Izuku, "So why did Jairu just run in here like that?" Izuku answers with a shrug, "I have no idea. One moment Kyoka and I were talking, then the next she just runs in here." Hagakure asks excitedly, "Did you just call Jairu by her first name?" Izuku answers confusedly, "Yeah, she asked me to." Ashido comments with a mischievous smile, "Looks like Jairu's got a crush." Izuku asks as he walks over to his classmates, "What's a crush?" Ashido answers as she looks at Izuku, "A crush is dash." She then notices that Izuku is only wearing his tank top and boxers, with her gaze fixed to Izuku's groin along with the rest of the girls, who slowly start blushing madly after processing what they're looking at. Eventually the guys realize what is going on as they all yell, "Izuku, why aren't you wearing any clothes?" Izuku explains confused, "I left my uniform back in the changing room and don't really wear anything under my armor since it would restrict my movements." Ida pushes Izuku to the stairs as he says, "Go to your room and put some clothes on immediately." Ida closes the door behind Izuku as he wonders to himself, what happened? After Izuku gets dressed, he heads back downstairs where the girls are still recovering from what they saw. "So what's a crush?" Everyone looks up at Izuku as Uraraka asks, "Is that really the first thing you ask after what just happened?" Izuku backs away and looks down as he explains, "I don't even know what happened." Tsuyu comments with a blush still on her face, "Izuku, you do know that normal people don't walk around their friends in their underwear, right?" Izuku answers as he looks at his classmates, "During training we wouldn't really wear anything that much different." Everyone blinks at Izuku before Shiro comments to Tsuyu, "Forgot who you were talking to, didn't you?" Tsuyu nods as he pinches the bridge of her nose, "Yep." Kirishima explains, Izuku bro, you can't just walk around in just your underwear when you're around your friends. Izuku replies trying to understand, oh, okay, is there any reason why? Kaminari answers, because everyone can see your. Kaminari waves his arms around, you know. Izuku replies, I have no idea what this. Izuku waves his arms like Kaminari is. Bakugo yells, he's saying you shouldn't walk around in your underwear because we could see your D-. All of his classmates gape at Bakugo as he simply says, come on, he wasn't going to get it if you were just going to beat around the bush. Izuku tilts his head as he says, I think I understand. Ida asks as he looks at Izuku, were you never taught SEC Ed? Izuku answers as he looks at Ida, if it wasn't relevant to training or battle then it wasn't necessary, or at least that was what my drill sergeant always said. Shinso asks with a quirked eyebrow, so you've never been given the talk? Izuku answers as he looks at Shinso, I don't think so. Shinso raises his hand as he says, not it. The rest of Izuku's classmates follow suit saying, not it. Ida asks as he looks at his classmates, are none of you going to help your vice class representative understand the nature of reproduction? Yaoyorozu comments, no offense Ida, but I think most of us think that's a bit too embarrassing to talk about especially with someone as innocent as Izuku. Izuku replies, I'm far from innocent. Everyone looks at Izuku before Ashido says, she means a different kind of innocent Izuku. Izuku simply says thoroughly confused, oh, okay. Ida places a hand on Izuku's shoulder as he says, don't worry Izuku, I'll do everything I can to teach you about SXL education. Kaminari snorts before he says, gay. Kirishima looks at Kaminari as he replies, really bro, not cool. Kaminari comments, oh come on, we were all thinking it. Ida leads Izuku upstairs as he says, don't worry Izuku, I'll answer every question you have. Izuku asks as he follows after Ida, what's a crush? Uraraka comments as she shakes her head, he's so innocent. Ashido replies, tell me about it, I honestly can't believe he doesn't know anything about SEC. Yaoyorozu says, to be fair he has lived his entire life in the Spartan program so I can see why he wouldn't know or understand. Ashido replies, still though, it's just so weird. Kaminari comments, I wonder if he's straight, gay, or bi. Bakugo then says as he stands up and walks away, F this, I'm going to my room. After Bakugo leaves Hagakure comments, well on the bright side we know why Jairu ran off like she did. Everyone nods in agreement as they say, yeah. For the rest of the day Ida explains to Izuku what SXL education is as well as telling him why he shouldn't walk around in his underwear around other people. Meanwhile most the girls try to forget that they saw Izuku in his underwear with his rippling muscles, water droplets running down his skin from the water hose, and his, nope. Of course Ashido and Hagakure don't deny that they enjoyed the sight and practically have it ingrained in their heads. That night Izuku dreams of his days with the UNSC and fighting against the Covenant. He recalls fighting against an entire army with only a few soldiers. He recalls watching his comrades die by his side and fighting mostly on his own just to survive, eventually. His dream melds into the USJ where he sees his fellow classmates fighting for their lives and dying. Izuku awakens from his sleep as he hears a knock from his door. Izuku wipes the sweat from his forehead as he goes to answer the door. As Izuku opens the door he sees Uraraka holding her pillow in her pajamas who looks away from him. Uraraka, what are you doing up so late? Uraraka bites her lip hesitantly before she answers, I had a nightmare. Izuku asks as he looks down at his friend, do you want to come in and talk about it? Uraraka simply nods before Izuku steps aside to let her into his room. Uraraka sits on Izuku's bed as Izuku takes the chair from his desk. After a moment Uraraka says, I dreamed that we were back in the USJ. I saw 13 getting torn apart by their own quirk. I saw Aizawa getting his head smashed in and I saw all of our classmates getting killed right before my eyes. Uraraka begins to tear up. I saw you, fighting all on your own trying to save everyone, but, you were. Izuku instinctively reaches out to Uraraka as he places a hand on her shoulder. It's alright Uraraka, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Uraraka wipes her eyes as she nods, it's just that, you always seemed so strong, but I felt so sure that we were all going to die back there. Izuku replies sympathetically with a nod, I know Uraraka, I know. Uraraka then asks after a moment, do you have dreams like that? Izuku thinks for a moment before he answers solemnly, every night. Uraraka looks up at Izuku in shock as he explains, I've been on the field of battle more times than I can count. I've seen my friends, my comrades, people who I considered family, all die while being unable to stop it. Uraraka replies as she brings a hand to her mouth trying to hold back a cry as tears pour down her face, that's horrible. Izuku nods as he looks down, I know, I was afraid that the USJ would be just like back then as well, but it wasn't. Izuku then looks Uraraka in the eyes. We survived, our teachers, Aizawa and 13 survived, they may have been injured but they're still alive. Uraraka nods as she wipes away her tears again. Yeah, they are. Izuku asks carefully, are you feeling better now? Uraraka nods before she asks, do you mind if I sleep in your room, at least just for the night? Izuku smiles lightly before he answers, not at all. Uraraka smiles in return before they both hear a knock at Izuku's door again. They both look confused before Izuku goes to open the door to see Yaoyorozu and Jiraiya at his door, who are both looking shaken. Izuku asks carefully, nightmare? Yaoyorozu and Jiraiya both nod before Izuku steps aside, allowing them to come in as they both see Uraraka with her tear-stained cheeks. Izuku then says as he closes the door, you two can sleep with us if you want. Yaoyorozu and Jiraiya both look at Izuku in shock before they bow their heads and say, thank you Izuku. It isn't long after they all lay down that they fall asleep, however shortly afterwards Izuku hears another knock at his door. Izuku opens his door as he rubs the sleep from his eyes to see Tsuyu, who is looking down. Izuku steps aside wordlessly, allowing her in before he gestures to the bed where their friends are still sleeping. After they had fallen back asleep, Hagakure and Ashido both sneak into Izuku's room before falling asleep with him and their friends. As they all sleep together, none of them have any more nightmares, not even Izuku. The following morning Yaoyorozu wakes up as she sits up from Izuku's chest, rubbing the sleep from her eyes before looking around. Yaoyorozu notices the other girls sleeping on and around Izuku as his arms are draped around them almost protectively. Yaoyorozu's eyes widen as her face begins to turn red as she shouts, oh my goodness. Apparently this was enough to wake Jiraiya, who also sits up rubbing her eyes before realizing where she is with wide eyes and a blush. Jiraiya looks over at Yaoyorozu as she says quietly, we should get out of here before anyone notices. Jiraiya nods in agreement, but as soon as they get out of bed, Alexander sounds off Izuku's alarm from his laptop, causing Izuku to slowly wake up. Ashido nuzzles against Izuku's shoulder as she mumbles, 5 more minutes. Uraraka and Tsuyu sit up as they're awakened by Alexander's alarm. As Izuku sits up he says, I'm awake Alexander. Alexander turns off the alarm as he replies, good to see that you're awake, well not see, but you know what I mean. Hagakure sits up as she asks, rubbing what seems to be her eyes, what time is it? Alexander answers as everyone looks at the laptop, it is currently 8:31 in the morning. Izuku asks curiously as Ashido sits up next to him, now fully awake, why did you wake us up so late? Alexander answers, after what happened yesterday I felt it was necessary to let you all rest. All the remaining girls realize where they all are before Alexander says, Principal Nedzu also informed me that there will be no school today after what happened in yesterday's incident, so you all can relax and recover all day today. Yaoyorozu and Jiraiya, who are already near the door, reply as they leave, thank you for the info. Uraraka looks at Izuku as she realizes that she was sleeping on his chest before hopping off his bed and heading out the door, thanks for your help Izuku. Tsuyu follows after Uraraka before she turns to look at Izuku, thanks for helping me Izuku. Ashido and Hagakure are the only two who don't seem to be worried or anxious about the whole situation. Izuku asks as he looks between the two remaining girls, shouldn't you both head to your own rooms? Ashido answers as she flops back down on Izuku's bed, nah, I want to sleep a few more minutes. Hagakure answers, I probably should, but I just want to stay here for a few more minutes, if you don't mind. Izuku nods in understanding before he gets out of bed, well, I should probably head back downstairs and see about relocating my armor back to the support studio. Ashido grabs on Izuku's arm as she tugs on him with a whine, no, stay with us. Izuku looks at Ashido before he says, I need to get my suit back to the studio so that they can run a diagnostics on it so that it doesn't fail in the next battle. Ashido lets go of Izuku's arm with a pout, you're no fun. Izuku then suggests as he looks at Ashido when he goes to his closet to get dressed, when I get back we could watch a movie. Ashido immediately brightens before she says, you've got a deal. Ashido rushes out of Izuku's room shortly after Izuku heads outside to grab his suit and take it back to the support studio. Izuku heads outside of the dorm where he left his suit of armor, which is now completely dry. He puts on his suit before he heads to the support studio. As Izuku stands in front of the door he knocks before he hears an explosion from inside and hears Power Loader say, Hatsum. Izuku opens the door to see smoke pouring out of the room with Power Loader standing over a pink-haired girl. I told you that thing was going to blow up. Hatsum replies with oil on her face and clothes, failure breeds success. Power Loader comments, yes it does, but when I tell you not to do something don't do it. Izuku continues standing at the door silently until Power Loader notices him, oh Izuku, what are you doing here? I thought school was cancelled for today. Izuku walks in the room as he answers, it was, but I needed to bring my suit by to run diagnostics to make sure nothing malfunctions for my suit's next use. Power Loader nods in understanding. Okay, I see, that would be problematic. Izuku then comments as he takes off his helmet, I'm also going to need another frag since I used one during the USJ and I shot a few rounds from my magnum. Power Loader takes Izuku's helmet as he hands it to him. Got it, anything else you can think of? Izuku thinks for a moment before he answers as an idea comes to mind. Could you possibly see about making some plasma grenades? They would have been of more use to me during the USJ attack, but I didn't want to waste them since I only have a few left on the Pelican. Power Loader answers with a nod, sure, but I'll need to have a look at one if I'm going to start making you some. Izuku pulls out a plasma grenade with his hand away from the button before he hands it to Power Loader. Don't press the button or else it'll stick to you and explode. Power Loader takes the grenade as he nods, got it. Suddenly Izuku realizes the pink-haired girl starts patting down his armor as she checks it over. Oh my, this is some amazing technology. Did you make this? Izuku looks at the girl somewhat confused before he answers, no, this armor was given to me for when I was in the Spartan program. The girl looks up at Izuku as she asks gleefully, can I look over it? Izuku answers with a shrug, as long as you don't break it, I don't see why not. The girl then sticks out her hand as she introduces herself, my name's Mei Hatsum, genius inventor extraordinaire. Izuku shakes Hatsum's hand as he replies, Spartan 715, codename, Forest Wolf, real name, Izuku. Hatsum then says, well Izuku, if you ever need help with your weapons or armor make sure to come to me, I'm sure my babies and I can help you out. Izuku tilts his head in confusion, babies. Power Loader answers as he places Izuku's helmet on a workbench, she means her inventions. Izuku nods in understanding before Power Loader says, I'll teach her how to repair your armor so that you don't have to worry about her breaking anything. Izuku replies with a nod, thank you Power Loader. Power Loader then points to a curtain, now then, you can go ahead and take off your suit behind that curtain. Izuku nods before he heads behind the curtain and begins taking off his armor. After he's done he walks out and says, I'll leave my equipment in your care. Power Loader replies with a wave as Hatsum examines Izuku's helmet, alright, see you later Izuku. Izuku waves back before walking out of the studio thinking, I hope Hatsum doesn't break anything by accident. As Izuku walks back into the dorms Ashido tackles him into a hug, but he remains standing with her hanging off his waist. Izuku. Ashido looks up at Izuku with a huge smile, I've got the perfect movies for all of us to watch. Izuku asks curiously as he looks down at Ashido, what are they? Ashido answers as she throws her arms up, Disney movies. Izuku asks with a quirked eyebrow, Disney movies? Ashido nods before she answers, more specifically the animated ones. Uraraka asks from the couch along with the rest of their class excluding Todoroki, which movie should we start with? Ashido answers as she walks over with Izuku following behind her, The Little Mermaid. Some of the guys groan in annoyance before Ashido comments with a pout, they're my movies so I pick what we watch, after that we can watch Aladdin. Izuku asks as he looks at Ashido, are these movies any good? Ashido turns to Izuku as she answers with a smile, these movies are all-time classics, I'm sure you'll love them. Izuku hums before he replies, if you say so. Ashido then grabs Izuku by the arm, come sit with me. Izuku gets dragged to an empty seat with Ashido sitting beside him as Uraraka and Yaoyorozu pout with jealousy seeing how close Ashido is with Izuku. Tsuyu has her usual blank face, but she's feeling a bit jealous herself along with Hagakure, and Jairu simply tries to ignore the two even though she wishes she was sitting beside Izuku. As they watch The Little Mermaid, Ida provides everyone with breakfast, which is mostly just everyone eating cereal together. After they're finished eating, Ida gathers up the dishes before taking them into the kitchen and cleaning them. Usually he would be demanding that everyone eat in the kitchen or cleaning their own dishes, but considering what had happened yesterday he felt it was necessary for everyone to relax and enjoy the movies. The movies they watch are The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Hercules, and Mulan. After they're done watching their Disney marathon, Ashido asks as she looks up at Izuku, so what did you think? Izuku hums as he puts his hand on his chin, I liked them all generally well, my favorite though would have to be The Lion King. The genie from Aladdin was pretty funny though, and I did feel a bit of a connection with Hercules, and Mulan reminded me of my time with the UNSC. Tsuyu asks with a finger on her chin, UNSC. Izuku realizes he let the information slip before he replies, it's nothing, just forget I said anything. After what had happened on the bus yesterday nobody tried to get an answer out of Izuku, but they had figured that the UNSC was some sort of military organization or something. Yaoyorozu comments as she stands up, well, we should probably get something to eat since I'm fairly certain we all forgot about lunch. At this moment quite a few of the students' stomach begin to growl as they blush from embarrassment before Yaoyorozu asks with a smile, what should we all eat tonight? As the students are deciding on what to eat for dinner, Izuku can't help but feel somewhat lonely since Aizawa isn't there. Ever since Izuku came to Earth, Aizawa had always been with him to help him, teach him, and just generally be there for him. Izuku then wonders to himself, is this what it's like to have a father? As the students are deciding what they should eat, Tsuyu notices Izuku's sad expression before she walks over and quietly asks, "Are you alright, Izuku?" Izuku looks up at Tsuyu in surprise before he answers, "I'm fine, Izuku looks down, I miss Aizawa." Everyone stops talking as they hear Izuku's answer as they look at him sympathetically. Tsuyu looks down at Izuku for a moment before she pulls him into a gentle hug. Izuku is somewhat surprised by the gesture before Tsuyu comments, "It's going to be okay, Aizawa's going to be okay. He'll be back before you know it." Izuku returns the hug as he buries his head in the crook of Tsuyu's shoulder. "Thank you, Tsuyu." Kaminari then takes out his phone as he says, "I'll place the order." After Kaminari places everyone's order, they all head to their own rooms. Izuku sits at his desk keeping himself occupied by reading up history and Japanese. Suddenly he hears a knock at his door. Izuku turns in his seat to look at the door as he says, "Come in." Jairu opens the door to Izuku's room holding her phone in her hand. "Hey Izuku, you alright?" Izuku answers as Jairu closes the door behind her and leans against the nearby wall. "Yeah, I'm fine, just trying to distract myself for a while." Jairu notices the textbooks on Izuku's desk as she hums in response. Jairu then asks as she holds up her phone, "You want to listen to some music?" Izuku looks at Jairu somewhat surprised as she looks away blushing. "I mean, if you don't want to, that's fine too." Izuku replies as he shakes his head with a light smile, "No, that's fine, I'd like to listen to some of your music." Izuku gets up and moves to his bed with Jairu going to sit beside him. Jairu pulls out her earbuds from her pocket and plugs them into her phone before offering one bud to Izuku. Izuku takes the bud before putting it in his ear as Jairu searches for a song Izuku might like. Since Jairu can tell Izuku is feeling a bit down, she decides to go with a classic song that's rather light sounding. Jairu clicks on the song Blackbird by the Beatles. The song starts with birds chirping in the background before an acoustic guitar starts to play. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. Izuku begins to feel his anxiety and despair wane as he listens to the melody of the song along with the soft voice that sings. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, into the light of a dark black night. Izuku begins to sway back and forth as he enjoys the music playing while Jairu simply smiles at him. Blackbird fly, into the light of a dark black night. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. Jairu asks as the song ends, looking at Izuku, "So how do you like it?" Izuku nods as he answers with a smile, "I like it." Jairu asks, "Would you like to hear another?" Izuku answers with a little enthusiasm, "Yeah." Jairu scrolls through her songs as she picks out another one. Jairu comments as she finds the song she was looking for, "This one is a bit more upbeat, but I think you'll like it." Izuku hums as Jairu presses play with the guitar starting out the song. Asked a girl what she wanted to be. She said, "Baby, can't you see? I want to be famous, a star on the screen. But you can do something in between. Baby, you can drive my car. Yes, I'm gonna be a star. Baby, you can drive my car. And maybe I'll love you." Izuku's smile grows as he listens to the song with his head bobbing up and down to the beat of the music. "I told the girl that my prospects were good. And she said, 'Baby, it's understood. Working for peanuts is all very fine. But I can show you a better time.'" Jairu begins to sing along with the song. "Baby, you can drive my car. Yes, I'm gonna be a star. Baby, you can drive my car." Jairu then looks at Izuku as she sings. "And maybe I'll love you." Izuku looks at Jairu in surprise as she looks away and continues to sing with the song. "I told a girl I can start right away. And she said, 'Listen babe, I got something to say. I got no car and it's breaking my heart.'" Jairu grabs Izuku's arm with both hands as she looks at him singing. "But I found a driver and that's a start." Izuku then sings along with Jairu, figuring out the pattern of the song. "Baby, you can drive my car. Yes, I'm gonna be a star. Baby, you can drive my car. And maybe I'll love you." Jairu then sings as she pumps her fist in the air. "Beep beep em beep beep yeah. Beep beep em beep beep yeah. Beep beep em beep beep yeah. Beep beep em beep beep yeah." As the song ends, Jairu asks smiling, "So what did you think of that one?" Izuku answers as he nods, looking at Jairu with a smile, "I like it, it's got a nice beat to it." Jairu comments as she scrolls through more of the songs on her phone. Yeah, you can't go wrong with the Beatles, they practically invented every genre of music. Izuku replies, yeah? Jairu answers, pretty much. Jairu shows Izuku a few more Beatles songs, then moves on to Kiss, AC/DC, Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, Journey, Queen, and many other classic rock bands. After a while Ida knocks on Izuku's door as he says, dinner's ready. Jairu calls out, we'll be down in a minute. Izuku pulls out the earbud as Jairu asks, wrapping her earphones up, so, what do you think? Izuku replies impressed, those are some amazing songs, of course I've never really listened to any music prior, but still. Jairu comments as she and Izuku stand up and head for the door, yeah, you can. Never really beat the classics. Izuku comments as Jairu opens the door and they both walk out, yeah, you were pretty good at singing too. Jairu blushes from embarrassment as she realizes that she was caught up in the music before, oh, I am not that good. Izuku replies as they walk down the hall, I thought you were amazing, you were really enjoying yourself. Jairu lowers her head from embarrassment before she comments looking at Izuku from the corner of her eye, yeah, well, you were pretty good too. Izuku looks at Jairu surprised before he replies with the brightest smile Jairu has ever seen, thank you. Jairu thinks to herself as her blush deepens and feels her heart beat faster, oh no. As they make their way to the kitchen, Siro says, hey guys, what were you doing up there? Izuku answers as Jairu covers her face in embarrassment, Jairu was letting me listen to her music. Kaminari asks with a smirk, oh yeah, any reason why Jairu? Jairu answers with a glare as she shoots her earphone jack centimeters from Kaminari's eyes as he throws his hands up, shut up, that's why. Kaminari replies fearfully, okay, whatever you say. Ashido comments as Izuku and Jairu both take their seats at the table, I should show you some of my dance moves. I think you'd really like them. Izuku replies as he looks at Ashido, I've never danced or seen anyone dance before so I wouldn't really know. Ashido says as she points her chopsticks at Izuku, you'd really like it. Izuku replies as he picks up his chopsticks, I'll have to take you up on your offer. They all begin to eat dinner together with most of them chatting with one another about random things. Izuku can't recall a time when he was ever this relaxed or happy, as he looks around the table to see all his classmates smiling and laughing he thinks to himself, I don't ever want to lose this. This was the first time in a very long time that Izuku ever felt like he belonged somewhere. Ashido says in the middle of dinner as if something hit her, I've got an idea. Everyone looks at her curiously before she states, tomorrow we should go shopping. Shinso asks confused, okay, any reason as to why? Ashido answers as she points her chopsticks at Shinso, of course, we need to show Izuku everything the mall has to offer. Izuku comments, I've been to a mall before. Yaoyorozu asks curiously, what did you buy? Izuku answers, I didn't buy anything since I didn't have any money at the time, but Aizawa bought me some clothes, a toothbrush, toothpaste, a razor, and some shaving cream for me. Ashido then asks, so you didn't buy anything else? Izuku shakes his head, no not really, I just got what I needed. Tsuyu asks as she looks at Izuku, is there anything you might want? Izuku hums as he thinks for a moment, not that I know of. Ashido then says with a grin, well then, we'll just have to show you around and see what you like. Izuku replies as he waves a hand, that isn't necessary. Ashido counters still smiling, no, but it's fun. Shinso comments, that's subjective. Ashido swats at Shinso as she says, hush you, it'll be fun. Ida then says as he adjusts his glasses, it would certainly be a learning experience for Izuku since he hasn't done it himself. Kirishima then adds, yeah, plus we can show him around and eat at some restaurant or something. Uraraka comments happily, that sounds like a great idea. Uraraka then asks as she looks at Izuku, what do you think Izuku, are you up for it? Izuku shrugs his shoulders as he answers, I don't see why not. Ashido then says triumphantly, it's settled then, tomorrow we head to the shopping mall. Majority of the students cheer in excitement for their plan for tomorrow while Izuku simply sits at the table confused as to why everyone is so excited to go shopping.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.